What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Astrolabe. So I'm wearing the Minecraft Zoomer glasses again in honor of the young king. He came up here earlier before I was ready to go live, and he asked me if I would go live to show everyone his. He said, "Can you bring up the viewers so that I can show them my new slippers?" He got some of those big puffy dinosaur slippers, look like dinosaur feet, the big claws on them. He's came running up here and roared at me as loud as he could, and he wanted me to bring up the viewers so that he could show them to you guys. And I told him that we'll have to do that on the next one because I wasn't quite ready to go live just then. Hey, my wife says he's sleeping in them now. Oh my god, you better take pictures of that. I don't if he kicks them off before I'm done streaming, then I'll be so sad if I don't get to see that. Um, but he did request. He said he saw the glasses up here, and he says, "Daddy," and I said, "Yeah, I got your glasses. I did the show with them yesterday." And and I said, what do you say tonight when the next show that I do? Should I wear these ones again or should I wear the old ones? And he said these ones. So in honor of him, I'm wearing these ones. I just changed my background or my banner picture on my Twitter account. And man, I saw it on the phone. And it doesn't look that great on the phone, but it bangs on a desktop. Look at this. Black pilling is treason. Fits so perfectly. I figured it's probably actually a good thing that part of the rope here, the action oriented part of the rope is cut off because this might be pushing the limits just a little bit. I don't know, but we do a little skirting around the limits here. Let me give credit to whom credit is due. Who was it? Uh, Rothgar the Scalding's Shield, a powerful reply guy. He posted that here, so I knew immediately I needed to steal that. That's going in the banner. Do me a favor and hit the like button, folks. We got a great one for you tonight. This is likely to be the last lab of the week. I know. Big, big, big. The crowd goes, oh, likely the last lab of the week. I'm flying out in the morning for Michigan to go visit the king of the Zoomers, Mr. Cooper Brooks. I'm going up there for the weekend, and I will be back late Monday evening. So there will also be no lab on Monday. There is the outside possibility that there is a lab on Friday between Cooper and I, but that will depend on if we can get his little office space set up well enough to have two of us. If we can get both of our microphones working, we can do the whole rigmarole. There may be a little something, so keep an eye out for that Friday in the PM time at some point. But otherwise, expect this to be the last lab of the week. So I'm going to make it a good one. The content has cooperated tonight, so there's a whole bunch of good stuff in here. We're going to talk about. Let's see here. What do we got? We got Leticia James, the Attorney General of New York, has been referred by the U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte to the DOJ for alleged mortgage fraud, and it seems pretty cut and dry. This is I think there is legitimate jail time in her future. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about a new White House. I suppose this isn't quite. I can't say this is the White House, but a new Trump orbit award that has been announced. The cuck of the day is being announced by the Trump War Room account. So we'll talk about who the cuck of the day is, and that will lead us into the conversation. You've heard a lot about the Maryland man, this MS-13 guy that we've talked about so many times. But nobody prior to now had really heard about the Maryland mom. So we're going to talk about that one. That one will be, if you have young ears listening, that one may be something to uh, protect them from. I don't know how many young ears you have listening to the Astrolabe. So maybe if you have young ears listening to the Astrolabe and something offends those young ears, it might be that the joke's on you. I got some more news in the defunding of core regime institutions. Marco Rubio sat down and did a little conversation with Mike Benz, talking about the new censorship department, or the censorship department that he has newly folded in on itself. Big win for the Mike Benz fans out there. And then I've got some extended comments from Treasury Besant from his interview he just did with Yahoo Finance. He has a couple of interesting comments I want to pick out regarding China. And then I've got some longer sections from this interview that I just listened to, posted yesterday, on the channel The Bitcoin Layer. This is the host Nick was joined by Matt Pines, who's the executive director of the Bitcoin Policy Institute, who is has some influence over the White House right now. So they're definitely listening to the guys at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. So he gives a really good breakdown of part of the nature of the dollar as the reserve currency and the role that China is playing in that, and then he's got a pretty clear view of where the administration is trying to take things. So he breaks it down really concisely, actually, very easy to understand, really concise. So I wanted to share that, and then later in the conversation, they also talk about what role gold, Bitcoin, and stable coins are going to play in these international negotiations that are going on. So there's that, and then I've also got a let's see here. This is a speech that was given by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director, where he referenced the US having technology that can manipulate time and space. Very interesting for our maybe have a brief little a schizo stream, a micro schizo stream within the lab. So we got lots of good stuff coming. Do me a favor, hit the like button. And a reminder, please let me know what the ad situation is like from your experience. I disabled ads. I demonetized the stream just straight up, so that I've heard YouTube doing lots of funny things. Like even when I say don't play ads, it plays ads anyways. It's like overruling me. So I tried just demonetizing the stream completely. So it says no, do not play any ads on this whatsoever. So Lurch says no ads so far. Okay, good, good. Let me know as long as that's the case, then I will leave it off. If it's still going to play ads for you, then I'm going to put it back on and get whatever little pennies from it I could get. But if there are no ads, then we'll definitely leave it off because that's great. I've listened to a couple of podcasts recently that had ads, and I was like, oh my god, how do, how do people do this? I listen to the vast majority of probably 90% of the stuff I listen to is on YouTube, and I just pay for YouTube Premium. So I don't experience ads very often, but every once in a while I'll listen to someone's podcast that I don't usually listen to, and it's only available on Rumble or on one of the podcatchers. And oh my god, how do you guys live like that? My hat goes off to you. Those of you who have listened consistently while experiencing that, I am in awe. I stand in awe. So it looks like everyone is saying no ads at all. So that is good. Excellent. Okay, good. So because I have demonetized it, please do if you like what I'm doing here and you want me to keep doing it. Then I've given you a number of different ways that you could support the show. Obviously, you can send a super chat or a super sticker. Here, you could become a YouTube channel member for $5 a month. You could join the King Pill Discord at kingpill.com. That's where you get the best bang for your buck. And then if you just want to send some no strings attached cash and you don't want to deposit 30% of it in the Google coffers, then there's a buy me a coffee link and a Cash App link in the description. Those ones you just are paying a little fee to Stripe and the credit card processing companies. All right. So before we get started, those of you who missed the show yesterday, uh, it ended earlier this morning, but the show that I did starting last night, we listened to the latest Paul Suda masterpiece. And if you haven't heard that yet, you guys got to go back and listen to that. If ignore the rest of the show, just make sure you get the Paul Suda part because it was just it may have been his best one yet. And my wife is down below me in her not underneath the desk. She's down on the lower floor underneath me in the office, and I have a squeaky chair, and it was such a banger. I couldn't hold still. I was bouncing my leg. I was going. I'm sitting here doing it right now. Squeaky, 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 squeaky. And she commented that it sounded like something rather untoward was happening upstairs. And she took a video of it. She posted it in the King Pill Discord, so I tweeted it out last night. This was my wife's experience of the Paul Suda banger. I really loved that video, man. Paul just touches me in ways that few can. And and I was just caught up in the moment. I couldn't control myself. Okay, let's start off here with a little bit of slop. It's funny watching the comments catch up. Don't do that when the in-laws visit. Two mice making whoopee. All right, let's get a banger here. If my wife is downstairs, then maybe she's gonna get a little bit of that here. This is what would Evanescence bring me to life sound like if it was sang by Creed? I have never heard a more 2004 sentence uttered in my life. So let's see what it sounds like from Matt Glocky.
If Creed wrote... Steve.
Mac.
If Creed wrote Bring Me to Life.
Bro. Yes.
How can you see into my eyes like open doors, leading you down into my core, where I've become so numb without a soul. My spirit sleeping somewhere cold until you find it there and lead me back home. Wake me up inside. Wake me up inside. Call my name and save me from the dark. In my blood to wake before I come undone. Save me from the nothing I've become.
Oh, no, don't stop. Don't stop now. I need an entire album of that. Stat, please give it to me. I really hope there's a longer version of that out there somewhere. I know Matt Glocky does these. There's a number of these guys that I follow that do these mashups, and they're so talented. It's incredible to be able to not just produce it well as just the original artist, but then to be able to produce it well while mimicking the style of the original artist is such a fascinating skill set. And man, a lot of them will only do a short's length worth of that, and people are building up entire careers monetizing a channel that does those sorts of things. Which is a great way for artists to get paid. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But often they don't do the whole thing. They'll just do, the first verse and the chorus. I need the whole thing, Matt Glocky. If you have not produced this yet, you must produce the entire thing. I can tell you, even the shortened version of it is absolutely getting sent over to the cyberbully. You loyal EWBSX listeners, I know you're out there. I watch the numbers. You guys will absolutely be hearing that from the cyberbully. EWBSX.app, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, or search EWBSX cyberbully in the app stores. Politically Catholic says Zoomers redoing 2000 songs is definitely a new trend. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. And I think this case, I think these guys, I've seen Matt Glocky around before. I've never really followed him super closely, but I think he's probably either a really young Zoomer. He started, when he was 16 or 18 or something like that, or he's like a young millennial. But because that really is, I'm thinking back to when, like, before the Zoomers got to the internet. I remember what the internet was like when it was like before the Zoomers came online, and the Zoomers and the Boomers both kind of came online at the same time. So I remember what the internet was like when it was almost exclusively millennials and Gen Xers. And that was one of the things the Obama years did, is Obama brought the Boomers online. Remember how a Facebook account used to be like, everyone had a Facebook account. It was cool. It was normal to have a Facebook account. And it hit like total saturation among the young people. And then it stayed that way for a little while. And then all of a sudden there was this big influx of Boomers that came on. And you even got the commercial like that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. There's the whole boomer Facebook person like doesn't know how to use Facebook and is constantly posting those email forward style things that are like, I do not give Facebook permission to use my information or whatever. Like that was a thing. Now Facebook is the boomer app. It's exclusively populated by the boomers. I mean, I know there's other, but like that's the majority of people. The I guess maybe the I don't know the leading edge of the internet has migrated away from Facebook, and now when I go on Facebook, I generally expect to see boomer posting. It's fascinating how that inverted, but it just occurred to me that the Zoomers and the Boomers both came online about the same time. 2012, 2014, and then especially after Trump, which totally changed the complexion of the internet. So these sorts of guys are kind of a holdover from that era of the internet, where it was a lot more like the cat videos sort of. You had your niche extremists who hung out in like Tumblr and Twitter and 4chan and corners of Reddit or whatever, but then the broader world was just it wasn't as politically charged. It was just people that were doing fun, goofy things that ranged from really super clever to completely like retarded jackass kind of stuff. Back when, yeah, just thinking about it now, back to before the internet was hyper politicized, which I know is kind of ironic that I produce political content on the internet, but we're all we're all trapped in here with each other, right? Okay, let's keep going here. There's this I don't know if this is a movie or a TV show or something like that, produced as I think it might be called The Apprentice or something. Uh, it's designed as trying to like lampoon Trump, and it just it doesn't work. Captive Dreamer posted this. He said, every clip I see from this Trump movie is just pure kino. I know it's a hatchet job, but they can't help but make Trump appear based.
And third of all, and most important, no matter how fucked you are, you never, ever, ever admit defeat. You always claim victory. Always.
That sounds like the U.S. foreign policy for the past quarter century.
Well, unlike that, this actually works. And I won a lot, Tony. I won a lot, and even when they said I didn't, I still turned it into a win, and that was the difference.
So, how'd you come by these set of rules?
Well, I have an instinct, Tony. I have a killer instinct. I always have. Listen, Tony, you have to have a natural ability. I'm a big believer in natural ability, and a lot of that is genetics. You have to be born with it, and some people aren't, and some people are, and that's the difference. You have to have it. And third of all, and most...
It's just kino. They can't help it. This is what it means when you start talking about a man having a mandate from heaven, rhetorically speaking. You could think of it in the strict sense, like you're saying you're making the declaration that God has blessed everything this man will do, which is a little more of a rhetorically loaded statement than I think more just using it more poetically speaking. He's been granted this power where, for good or for evil, he's been granted this power where every attempt to he's like the definition of anti-fragile. Every attempt to try to get a chink in his armor just makes him stronger. His power levels just keep increasing. It doesn't matter what they try to do to him. They're like, oh, we're gonna make fun of his hair and kind of get the lips. Yeah, he's got he talks with his lips out here like this, so we're gonna make the guy do. I can't even do it. You had to go hire. You had to go find an actor or get an actor to learn how to pooch his lips out to try to make fun of the guy, and he just winds up making a great portrayal of him that makes you like him even more. This is the mandate of heaven. Speaking of guys we like and just keep liking, and videos that make you keep liking him more, Lee says, wow, this guy was ahead of his time. Look, I found this digging deep in the internet, mining in the bowels of the cavernous guts of the internet, aka just following Lee on Twitter. I found this video for you guys. High school age Stephen Miller on how to deal with the war in Iraq. You guys think that you've seen the best Gigajew clip? You have not yet seen the best Gigajew clip. This is the best Gigajew clip.
In concern to the issue of the Iraqi civilians, I think that as many of them should survive as possible, because the goal of any military conflict is to kill as few people as possible. But as for Saddam Hussein and his henchmen, I think the ideal solution would be to cut off their fingers. I don't think it's necessary to kill them entirely. We're not a barbaric people. We respect life. Therefore, torture is the way to go, because tortured people can live. Torture is a celebration of life and human dignity. And we need to remember that as we enter these very dark and dangerous times in the next century. I only hope that many of my peers and people who will be leading this country will appreciate the value and respect that torture shows towards other cultures.
Remember the value and respect that torture shows to other cultures. Oh my God. I wish I could have known this guy at this age. Oh man, I would have thought he was completely off his nut. Obviously, he's a little drunk here, it looks like. Total throwback to, I mean, this is my high school years. He's a couple years older than I am. This is my high school years. I lived this life here. This is now one of the most. I'm starting to get a whole like. I'm running out of space for my most important members of the Trump administration. You know, there's obviously 47 to 48 themselves, and then Besant. I've said Besant is like, he's number 3. But I don't know, man. Stephen Miller really is vying for that number 3 spot. What a guy. All right, guys. Have you guys been trusting? We here at the Astrolabe show are trusters. We truce. Yes, sir, Mr. President. I'm trusting. Conan Esquire. He's repenting. Okay, I should have trusted the plan. I should have been a truster. All the non-trusters inevitably regret their traitorism, their lack of faith. Trump War Room tweets out, U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Pulte. This is funny, too. It's so priceless. If you've been on the internet long enough, you know who Pulte is. Bill Pulte, who is... this one kind of flew underneath the radar. He's the U.S. Director of Federal Housing. He used to do these giveaways on Twitter where it was like really obvious engagement bait, but he was, as far as I could tell, he was genuinely giving away hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars at a time, and built up quite an audience from doing that. He has a, I don't know. There's definitely a scammy aspect to him, but I don't know if there's lots of people that want to paint him as scammy, and so I haven't dug into it deep enough to understand genuinely whether it is or not. But it's funny for him to be the guy that winds up as the director of federal housing. And he has referred New York Attorney General Leticia James to the DOJ for alleged mortgage fraud. Now, if you remember, New York Attorney General Leticia James was one of the, she's one of the brilliant scholars who was primarily responsible for much of the prosecution against Trump all the prosecution against Trump in New York. She was going all out, completely making a mockery of the profession, shamelessly. I think she even was it hers? Might have been another person. There's so many of them who actually campaigned on a platform of, I will get Trump no matter what. I will come up with any pretext whatsoever to get him. Of course, all of it winds up falling flat. And now, how the turntables. Have you been not trusting Anon? This may be one of the first big ones to go down, because I'm going to play this clip here from Laura Ingraham. I'm sorry, guys. I have to put you up. I make you guys tolerate Laura Ingraham for a little bit, but you could do it. I believe in you. But this is, people have been saying, like, when are the arrests coming? When are the people who have been perverting the justice system, using it flagrantly for their own gain, when are they going to get arrested? Well, Leticia James may be the first one to go down.
And now the Trump Justice Department may be a pain in her you-know-what. The Angle has obtained shocking allegations leveled by the Trump administration against New York Attorney General Leticia James. The Federal Housing Finance Agency has sent a criminal referral to the DOJ accusing James of mortgage fraud. In a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Director Bill Pulte says James appears to have falsified records in order to meet certain lending requirements and receive favorable loan terms. He cited a property in Virginia that she's allegedly claimed as her principal residence and a property in New York that she claimed as a 4-unit structure instead of the required, instead of a 5, which Pulte says means she was able to get a different type and more favorable loan. Joining me now is Jonathan Turley, Fox News contributor and law professor at GW University. Jonathan, mortgage fraud is rampant in the United States. There's all sorts of fraud that's rampant. There's disability fraud that they've vowed to crack down on in the Trump administration. But this is another thing that they have vowed to crack down on because it costs real money. Your reaction to these allegations?
Well, obviously, the irony is perfectly crushing. This is a person who prosecuted Trump for everything short of ripping a label off a mattress. And among the charges that were brought in New York, in not just the civil but the criminal case, was making false or misleading statements to financial institutions. And one of these sections, Section 1014 of the federal code, is prosecuted. It took me about 60 seconds of a search to find cases that the Department of Justice brought against people who falsely claimed that property was their principal residence in order to get loans. So
she's falsely claiming that this property is her principal residence so that she can get these get favorable loan terms. This property is in Norfolk, Virginia, and she is an elected official in New York. She is the sitting attorney general in New York, claiming that this Norfolk, Virginia home is her primary residence so that she can get preferable terms. But that's not all. There's more to it.
This is well-tread areas for the Justice Department. As for James, if we apply the Leticia James standard that she created, there'd be little question here. This seems pretty straightforward. What the administration is saying is this was not her principal residence. In fact, as a New York elected official, she had to say that her principal residence was in New York. This was an out-of-state residence. But also, they claim that in some of these forms, she actually states that her father is her husband in order to file as a married couple. So there's a lot of those questions. And as you know, the Supreme Court just stated earlier in March in a case called Thompson that they want to see knowing false statements under sections like 1014, not just misleading statements. These are misleading statements. Either it's your principal residence or it's not.
Or it's not.
Either you're married to your father or he's your father. So they can this can satisfy the Thompson standard.
Yeah, well, Jonathan, we reached out to the DOJ, and they have no comment on this referral. We also reached out to Attorney General James, who did not respond to us either. So, again, everyone wants the best interest rate you can get. I understand that. But, she's a lawyer. She knows that when you sign a mortgage application, that mortgage application, if you're borrowing money, if you're not borrowing money, nobody cares whether it's your principal residence, except, where you file your taxes. But she decided to state that that was her principal residence, knowing it was not her principal residence. I didn't even know she had property. I mean, I guess she had property in Virginia and she has rental or investment property in New York. That's fine. But in the New York matter, to get the favorable rate, the building could only have 4 units. But it looks like the entirety of this building, it had 5 units, meaning it was in violation of the actual loan agreement. And again, this is not a novel application of the law, Jonathan. As you stated during the persecution of Donald Trump, she was using all these novel applications of law to go after him. This isn't novel. This is a black and white issue. You either did or you didn't.
Right, and this has been prosecuted in the past. Now, we have not heard her side of this, but these documents themselves are quite damning. It's hard to see how the residences listed were her principal residence. The business about her father is just bizarre. Now, I'll note that one of the things that Letitia James stressed in her case against Trump is that Trump had to review documents that were filed in his name. And so she dismissed the argument that this was something that Trump's people put together. She said he's ultimately responsible. So they allege that she gave a power of attorney in a couple of these instances, but according to her own standard, that's not enough.
This is just, I had to play the whole thing because at every step in the process, it just gets better and better and better. So mortgage fraud effectively was one of the things that she was pursuing Trump for falsely, I believe that was one of her cases for overinflating the value, the market value of his property when he was taking a loan out against it, which is, if you are remotely aware of how any of this works, is completely insane on the face of it. Because the other, he can submit whatever he wants to say his property is valued at whatever he wants it to be. And then if the bank decides to accept that valuation, that's the bank's decision. So there's nothing even fraudulent in it to begin with. But then it ultimately, in all these cases, it was, as Laura Ingram said here, it was like twisting around trying to find novel applications of the law that are like strictly down to the absolute letter of it. Reading it in a really arcane way. And here she is now, like, she's going to pursue him to the end of the earth to say, no, it doesn't matter if you delegated responsibility away for doing some of these things. You're ultimately responsible for it, so we're going to hold you responsible for it. Now she wants to claim, oh, it was power of attorney. Someone else did this on my behalf, and I didn't know about it. It's so delicious. And I'm pretty sure Politically Catholic, if you're in the chat, you've been closer to this world than I have, more recently than I have. But if I remember correctly, that means if she had a 5-unit building and she was declaring it as a 4-unit building, I think that means that she was trying to get an FHA loan, which means she's getting she's committing mortgage fraud to get a federally insured mortgage. It's the And then she says she's married to her father. It's just, you could not write a better story than this. I don't see how it doesn't get taken up. It's too good. It's too obvious. Yes, 4 units is the cutoff for FHA. So that almost certainly means the reason she was saying that it was 4 units instead of 5 is because she would not have to be considered a commercial unit, which changes the all of the loan structure and everything. Oh, imagine thinking that you could say you're married to your father and that this would somehow blow up on you. And then doing all of this and creating a massive political firestorm centered around you to induce a bunch of people to start looking for any little thing they can get away with. Don't let these people's brazenness, like when you see people operating really brazenly, that either means that they have full assurance that they're completely protected from the consequences of their actions. So they have full assurances of just how much they're winning, or they're simply retarded. These people are incredibly brazen because they're simply retarded. They're not people to be feared. They're people to be ruled. Politically Catholic says with commercial loans, you also have stricter building codes. Residential building codes are far more relaxed. And yeah, there's probably insurance fraud here as well. Yeah. There's going to be so many things. And there's been cases like this just recently that have been against elected officials who were engaged in mortgage fraud and were prosecuted for it and are in prison now. There is no reason she should not wind up in prison based on the terms of this. I mean, she should be in prison anyways. But I don't care what reason you use to get them in prison. Just like we're going to talk about the Ivy League schools here in a little bit. I don't care that they're using anti-Semitism as a pretext for stripping funding from them. I do not care. Them having their funding stripped and breaking the back, like someone 5 years ago, someone says in 5 years the Trump administration is going to be going after all of the Ivy League schools aggressively, legally, stripping funding from them. He's already stripped billions of dollars from different ones. I think Cornell had like $1 billion stripped. They're stripping funding away from them like crazy. And now, well, I'll get to the story here about what else they're doing here in just a second, but I do not care if anti-Semitism is the pretext. This is the hive of scum and villainy that produces everything else. This is like the choke point that has caused the proliferation of every other last little bit of leftism, globalism, corruption, human trafficking. All of this has been made possible because of this choke point. Break the back of the university system, force it out into the open, completely smear mud all over its face, discredit it, disincentivize people from, like, it's no longer an institution of esteem. It doesn't, now it's like a black mark. Oh, I don't want to, people like hiding their Harvard degrees and stuff. No, I don't want to be affiliated with that organization. And it actually heightens the cosmic justice of it all. That it's anti-Semitism that is being used as the wedge issue to take them down. You know who would think this way? This is how Stephen Miller would think. Stephen Miller would be like, what pretext can we use that is absolutely ironclad and will ensure that nobody can stand in the way of it? Anti-Semitism. The one thing that's off limits. The one thing that you cannot critique in any way, shape, or form. This is the definition of being hoisted on your own petard. This is cosmic justice levels 9,000. Ancient peoples would have read this as a message from the gods. You built your entire artifice around things like the Halabunga and all the adjacent issues that plug into that. And that becomes the thing that takes you down. Mwah. Absolute chef's kiss. Okay, let me run back here. There was a super chat, and I want to make sure that I got that one before it disappears. There it is. $10 from Lurch. Thank you, my good friend. My gigantic, tall friend. A regular Baron Trump, this one. He says, $10, monetizing the lab. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay. Phil Gibson. I just saw that. Where'd that go? You're 37? Holy shit, you're younger than I thought. I don't know if I'm supposed to be insulted or complimented by that. You thought I was old? Oh no. Okay, let me get caught up here. Yeah, pay off student loans with the funding they yank. Absolutely, there you go. Student loans is not something that I'm ever going to be objective about. Ryan Isaac says, Miller's been plotting this since his high school days. Let's find a way to double back on my ethnos to destroy my ethnos. Yes. Political Catholic. Who would think this way? Me fidgeting guiltily. Don't look at me. All right. So, to honor, this is from Trump War Room. To honor former Trump War Room leader Stephen Chung, who is what is he? We got to have a name for him. He's our Mongol. What do we call him? Our Gigacon? Is he our Gigacon? That sounds like gig economy. You guys workshop that one for me. To honor former Trump War Room leader Stephen Chung, who etched his name in history as the first White House communications director to have the term cuck archived after using it to describe Tim Walz from his official account, we are proud to introduce a new daily accolade, the Cuck of the Day Award. We will be announcing the first winner at the end of the day. Any guesses who it's going to be? We're getting from the Trump War Room account, they're now going to be announcing the cuck of the day because the term cuck has been archived because our gigantic Mongol, our gigantic Mongol boy, our odd job here, got it put into the official archives. Incredible. Our guy occupied government fully. This is what I voted for. And here's the cuck of the day. Senator Chris Van Hollen, D, MS-13, is the first ever Trump War Room cuck of the day winner. Congratulations, Chris. The only thing that would make this better is this would be this coming from the White House account directly. But I understand we can't do that just yet. Oh my God. He committed the cardinal sin on the internet. You can never post a picture of yourself standing there holding up a sign. This is the worst thing you could ever do. Now the Trump War Room account is dunking on him. Okay, so who's Chris Van Hollen? Chris Van Hollen is this Maryland lawmaker who has dedicated all of his time suddenly recently chasing down this Maryland man, the MS-13 gang member who was deported to El Salvador. The guy, the Salvadorian citizen who was in the United States illegally, had multiple deportation orders, and was sent back to El Salvador. He has decided that this is what he's going to plant his flag on. This is what is going to define his career. This is how he's going to launch himself into the stratosphere, is by dying on the hill of getting this Maryland man back from El Salvador. So he flew down to El Salvador, and he's vlogging his way down there. I'm not going to subject you guys to all the videos he's posted today, but he's vlogging his way there about how he's going to go and check on him. He met with the vice president of El Salvador. The vice president of El Salvador had to take time off of what he was doing to go meet with an American lawmaker down there who's there to ask him, hey, can you please release this member of a terrorist gang? Can you please release him so that he can fly back to the United States? Clown World doesn't even begin to describe this. I haven't seen anything from Cory Booker. I don't know if he was actually going, if he's down there with him as well. But I saw all the Chris Van Hollen stuff, especially once I saw this from the Trump War Room account. So, meanwhile, you guys, you gotta truce, man. You gotta truce. This administration knows how to take the moral high ground like none other. So on the day that this guy goes down there to utterly beclown himself, he's plastering himself all the other Democrats are all like, woohoo! Look at this great man. Trump goes to the White House and invites the mother of not Maryland man, but Maryland mom, and gave her the microphone. Now, this is the part here. If you got young ears, there's this is graphic, but this is it feels a little macabre to talk about this in terms of like PR victories and whatnot, but we are evaluating the objective trajectory up and down here. And this is a stunning PR victory, which means even more normalization of mass deportations. The pressure is constantly increasing on mass deportations. Because if we don't have mass deportations, we get more stories like this.
A lot of you don't know the whole story about Rachel and about the crime that was committed against her. Even us, her family, we didn't know all the details. They kept most of it close to their chest, the detectives, because they didn't want to do anything to hurt the case. They wanted to keep the integrity of the case, so they kept everything close. I sat for the last 2 weeks in her trial, and we saw layer upon layer upon layer of evidence against the accused, an illegal immigrant from El Salvador. And the things that we thought, well, maybe this might have happened, we didn't know. But when we were at the trial, we got all the puzzle pieces. And I want to share some of those things with you. You know that Rachel's a 37-year-old mother. She has 5 children. We've walked the trail for the last 25 years that we've lived in Maryland. It's a safe place for our family. It's where we go to get a little bit of New England, because that's where we're from, New England. When she went on that trail that day, she was not planning on dying. She wasn't planning on walking to her death. She was planning on going to the grocery store with her girls afterwards. Victor Martinez, he waited for her. He waited for her to come closer. He saw her. He saw that there was nobody around. He attacked her. He dragged her 150 feet, blood gushing from her head. It left a 150-foot trail of her blood to the culverts, where he picked her up, he threw her against the wall of the tunnel, and he raped her. But before he did that, he stopped on that trail, and rocks, still stained with her blood, he used them to hammer her head against those rocks. They say at least 20 times they could count the cuts in her head. They said that when they did the autopsy, and I've seen the pictures, there's a 6-inch square in the back of her head where the skull is shattered the way that you would crush an eggshell in pieces. 3/4 of her brain hemorrhaged. Her right and left side of her face bashed in. Her beautiful face bashed in. Her head bashed in. Broken bones, fractures. He takes and he drags her some more. He drags her through the thorn bushes. She has all the scrapes and cuts on her body. There wasn't 1 inch of her body that didn't have some kind of injury, whether it's bruising, broken bones, contusions, the scratches. She had a fractured rib, fractured nose, fractured skull. And then he takes her into the tunnel and he picks her up. He throws her against the wall. Blood is gushing from her head. Her hair is soaked in blood. And they showed us pictures of her body against the wall, outlined. The blood outlined her body. And you could see where the blood ran down around her as he was raping her. And then he threw her down and raped her some more. And then he strangled her because he didn't want her to be able to live to tell the story. They said that when they did the autopsy on her neck, that one of the things they do is they open up the neck and they look to see how far the injury is. And they went all the way down as far as an injury is possible, hemorrhaging in the muscles because of how strong and violent the group was around her. These are the kind of people that have no compulsion. But to them, this is nothing. And when he was sitting in the courtroom, he actually looked like he thought he was going to be set free. There was no remorse on his face at all. This person took my daughter so violently and so gruesomely and so graphically that they sealed the pictures, because I don't want my granddaughters to see these pictures. These are the kind of criminals President Trump wants to remove from our country. These are the kind of criminals that we need to remove from our country. We are American citizens. Why should we allow people like this, violent criminals that have no conscience at all, to murder our mothers, our sisters, our daughters? I don't understand why there's even any kind of problem with this. And it's not that it's political, like the left or the right, although I understand different parties have used it in the past. But we have to look at it as we are American citizens. We need to protect our families, our borders, our children. I don't care about politics. Well, I do, but I want to preserve life. And that's the only reason why I have taken and spoken about Rachel all this time. If you're a mother here in the room, can you imagine standing there alive, you're alive, and someone comes and puts their hands into your chest and rips out your heart? That's what it feels like. It feels like a part of you is being ripped out of you. You can't even describe the pain. Just like you can't describe to your husband what it feels like to carry a baby in your womb, or to feel those first kicks, or to know just intuitively if it's a boy or a girl. It's only a thing that a mother knows. Why are we not protecting the American citizens? It's just common sense. Why are we not protecting our children? And to have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren? I don't understand this. Thank you.
Here's Trump with her.
Beautiful. She's a beautiful woman. She's been through hell. She's been through hell, right?
Oh, yes.
Your daughter's looking down proud of you. You know that. Just keep it going.
I know.
Keep it going.
It's like you said.
Stay with that one.
It's like you said, we have purpose.
It's a purpose. Yeah. She's proud of you.
That senator has not tweeted this woman's name once. Her senator flew down to El Salvador to try to get this other guy back, and he hasn't even acknowledged her once. He can't even do the token, just fire off a tweet and pretend I did something. Has not tweeted her name a single time. And he flew to El Salvador to get this other guy back. This is that's the sort of gross dereliction of duty that it's a moral crime that ought to be a crime. If you're a congressman, if you're in a position of leadership, like specifically a delegated representative of your constituents, and you betray them this hard, that needs to be a crime. This is like be put in stocks in the town square and have people throw dog shit and rotten fruit at you for 30 days. And then everybody know you for the rest of your life as the guy who spent 30 days in stocks in the town square having dog shit and rotten fruit thrown at him. That's what it's like to have a civilization. That's how far we've fallen. I'm very glad that we have the Trump administration doing what the Trump administration is doing. They're doing their part. They can't do everything. You can't expect them to single-handedly change everything. They're doing their part. The rest of it is up to the rest of us. From Bad Hombre at Joma_GC says, you've got to love how Trump waited until Van Hollen was on the ground in El Salvador, making a complete fool of himself, just to drop the motherload of irrefutable evidence exposing just how much of a scumbag the MS-13 gangbanger really is. It's called We Do a Little Trolling. Now, to be clear, I want to make sure this is clear. The guy who, the so-called Maryland man, and the guy who committed this crime against this woman are different. Those are different people. Both of them are illegal MS-13 members. But there's two separate men there. And while we're on this subject, I just had to include this clip as well. Democrat Mike Nellis, a core Kamala insider, was on Piers Morgan with Jack Posobiec, and they started talking about this, and Jack decided to not mess around.
Where, by the way, I love if the Democrats want to make this their argument for the midterms going to 2026. Please, please make illegal aliens and support for MS-13. Mike, please go tell all your buddies on the Democrat side. I would love for you to make this your argument going in, that we need more illegal aliens in the country. I'm right there with you because I think that's perfect for the Democrats. They consistently do this over and over and over. And, you know, people say that this guy doesn't have a criminal record. Well, it just broke earlier today that, as a matter of fact, Abrego Garcia did actually have, his wife had a restraining order on him that was filed in 2021, that it was petitioned, a final order was put up, and yet I don't hear anyone talking about this, that in fact he was a wife beater in addition to this information that he was a member of MS-13. And people will sit there blue in the face and say, oh, he was this innocent guy, he was just working. It's simply not true.
Right, but you're saying it's simply not true. You believe 100% he was an MS-13 gang member. My concern about this story is not that if he is a gang member,
the order that he was
gang,
deported was not that he was an MS-13 member. It was that he was illegal. That was the original order. And then the second order came out that said he was deported to a different country, not El Salvador.
So hold on for just a second. First of all, Jack, great to meet you. Longtime fan. Like, you are one of the internet's biggest conspiracy theorists, and I'm very glad to be on this panel with you, so I could just call you out for that. But like everything,
how was your Kamala Harris campaign last year? How did that go? Did that go as well as your weight loss, Mike? How are you still like this when there's still Ozempic? How are you still like this when Ozempic exists, Mike?
Jack, hang on, let me talk for a second.
Mike, how many steps are you up to today? No, if you're going to come out here and attack me personally, then I'm going to respond right back.
Don't make the Polish Catholic angry. I don't care what anyone says. I like Jack Posobiec. New from Elena Treen with Evan Perez on CNN. The IRS is making plans to rescind the tax-exempt status of Harvard University, according to two sources familiar with the matter. A final decision on rescinding the university's tax exemption is expected soon, the sources said. And the Internal Revenue Service is making plans to rescind the tax-exempt status of Harvard University, which would be an extraordinary step of retaliation as the Trump administration seeks to turn up pressure on the university that has defied its demands to change its hiring and other practices. This is not tanks in Harvard Yard, but it's not far from it. It is an existential threat. The administration already has blocked more than $2 billion in funding from the nation's oldest university, which is fighting the White House's policy demands, citing the constitutional right of private universities to determine their own teaching practices. Private university. We have the constitutional right as a private university to determine our own teaching practices, which is why we need $2 billion in public funding. President Donald Trump in recent days raised the idea of punishing the Ivy League university for not complying with what the administration has sought to portray as a campaign to fight anti-Semitism. Quote, Perhaps Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status and be taxed as a political entity if it keeps pushing political, ideological, and terrorist-inspired / supporting sickness. Remember, tax-exempt status is totally contingent on acting in the public interest. And I touched on this a minute ago, but I'll say it again. If you, a retard, read this as more bending society for the will of the Jews, rather than, a loophole for getting Muslim, let's just put it this way, non-Christian brown people removed from the country. Because that's what it is. It's your choice whether you want to be the retard or the genius. You should choose to be a genius like me. Asked about CNN's reporting on the arena, Education Secretary Linda McMahon said that she doesn't know whether Harvard will lose its tax-exempt status, but argued, quote, it was certainly worth looking into. We'll see what IRS comes back with relative to Harvard, McMahon told CNN's Casey Hunt. I certainly think, in elitist schools, especially that have these incredibly large endowments, we should probably have a look into that. She added that it is her guess that the IRS is also looking at tax-exempt statuses of other universities. Gary Shapley, whom Trump picked this week, whom Trump this week picked as acting IRS commissioner, has the authority to rescind the tax exemption under federal law. Doing so typically comes after the agency has made a determination that an organization has violated the rules that govern tax exemptions for nonprofit entities. Not-for-profit organizations that benefit from the tax exemption can lose it if they violate a number of rules, including for political activity. So Harvard basically has to make the case that they're not involved in political activity at all. But a rescission would be a rare move by the IRS. In the 1980s, the agency revoked the tax exemption of a Christian college that the IRS determined had used a racially discriminatory admissions policy. R. William Snyder, accounting and taxes professor at George Mason University's Costello College of Business, told CNN, to my knowledge, this is the first time an administration has tried something like this. Snyder added, the whole purpose of higher education is to educate the masses. Just because they educate in a way that you don't like, is that grounds to terminate their tax-exempt status? I'd say no. It's just insane. The tax-exempt status includes these provisions which, when violated, will result in you losing your tax-exempt status. And these people will hold this in their brain while simultaneously saying, well, they should be free to teach whatever they want. We shouldn't have to apply a political activism filter over what they're doing. Is their teaching whatever or however they want? Is this functioning as political activism that would violate their nonprofit status? Oh, we can't ask that question. Anyways, this just kind of describes the how the whole process would work. This is great here. John Lovett tweets, law firms cave, the demands don't stop. Columbia caves, the demands don't stop. Paramount enters settlement talks with Trump over a frivolous lawsuit. Trump still pushes FCC to revoke CBS's broadcast license over 60 Minutes. Capitulation doesn't save you. You torch your reputation and prove yourself to be a soft target. You willingly give Trump power he could not take. Fighting back is the only way, and the more who do, the weaker Trump will prove to be. What he's referencing here is, got a couple of screenshots from articles. First says, the deals have been widely criticized as they are seen by many in the legal community as unconstitutional and undemocratic. 4 firms whom Mr. Trump leveled executive orders against have fought them in court, all quickly receiving rulings from federal judges who temporarily halted them. But now that 9 firms have agreed to deals and committed to nearly $1 billion worth of pro bono legal work, some Trump advisors have started having discussions about a range of options for what the firm's lawyers can be deployed to work on, according to 2 people briefed on the matter. That work could include sending the lawyers to help Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency or deploying them to aid the Justice Department, they said. Now, you got to know that, if you're going to get $1 billion worth of pro bono legal work, you're not going to be getting high-quality legal work, especially if the people that are doing it are being forced to do it as part of a settlement. This is about bending the knee. This is about proving who the big dog in town is. This is mafia shit. Our president is a mafia boss. You might even call him a Don. And I'm proud of it. Another section here from another article. The Trump administration may seek to have a federal judge enforce any deal it reaches with Columbia University in an arrangement that could ensure that the White House has a hand in the school's dealings for years to come, according to 4 people with knowledge of the matter. Administration officials are discussing the possibility of seeking a consent decree to ratify any agreement the White House reaches in its negotiations with the school after the federal government canceled about $400 million in grants and contracts and accused Columbia of failing to stem harassment of Jewish students on campus last year. A decree could allow President Trump to continue to exert power over one of New York City's flagship universities and could serve as a model for other schools seeking to negotiate with the White House. Let's just nationalize the universities. Make it formal. Just straight up nationalize them. Let's go. And Oilfield Rando says, oh, you're telling me the goalposts will always move? That more compromises will always be demanded of you from your political opponents, no matter how much you give them? Well, I only have 5 words. How does it feel, motherfucker? Hear, hear. Hey, you can't make unending incremental demands for concessions from us. That's our thing. What the hell, bro? I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. I voted for this. I also voted for this. Breaking from Mike Benz. The U.S. State Department has just placed all 30 full-time staff at the Global Engagement Center's remnant, known as RFEMI, on leave, eliminated all 50 full-time staff positions, and delivered a notice to Congress ending RFEMI's existence and $65 million in funding. This historic development today was made possible by Secretary Rubio and Acting Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy, Darren J. Beatty, a longtime member of the Our Guy contingent. As part of a complete restructuring of the State Department's activities and capacities to prevent the abuses and weaponization of the past. The reputation of Marco Grande continues to soar. Macro Rubio. The development today is the State Department's initiation of an RAF, or a reduction in force, that will permanently end the positions at the Global Engagement Center /RFEMI, so there is no more reshuffling of positions or simple renamings of the office to carry out the same malign censorship efforts. While GEC was formally sunset late last year after a showdown in Congress to deny its reauthorization, the Biden State Department got around this by putting GEC's staff and operations under a new name, the Counter Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference Office, or RFEMI. Last month, Secretary Rubio and Acting Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy, Darren Beatty, terminated 100-plus contractors that RFEMI worked with, which formed a deep partner web between censorship operatives in the private sector and the muscle of the U.S. government to go after speech. But in government, it's easier to terminate a contractor than a public employee. The structuring of today's move as stage 1 of an RIF to eliminate the office and dissolve the office entirely prevents the possibility of bureaucratic delays that come from contesting firings. So they're not being let go as they're not being fired. They are being terminated as a result of a reduction in force. Now, Secretary Rubio posted this. He says, over the past half decade, our own governing ruling class nearly destroyed America's long free speech history. Today, we are putting that to an end. And he wrote this article in The Federalist that I am going to read now. Rubio, to protect free speech, the censorship industrial complex must be dismantled. No matter what name it goes by, the Global Engagement Center is dead. It will not return. During his historic comeback campaign in 2024, President Trump vowed to close the book on a dark chapter in America's constitutional history, the weaponization of America's own government to silence, censor, and suppress the free speech of ordinary Americans. The American people responded to this promise by giving President Trump a landslide victory last November. Everything this administration has done since then has been laser focused on fulfilling the promises made during that campaign. Today, it is my pleasure to announce the State Department is taking a crucial step toward keeping the president's promise to liberate American speech by abolishing forever the body formerly known as the Global Engagement Center. GEC was supposed to be dead already, but as many have learned the hard way in Washington, D.C., few things ever truly die. When Republicans in Congress sunset GEC's funding at the end of last year, the new Biden State Department simply slapped on a new name. The GEC became the Counter Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference Office with the same roster of employees. With this new name, they hoped to survive the transition to the new administration. Today, we are putting that to an end. Whatever name it goes by, GEC is dead. It will not return. Over the past half-decade, bodies like GEC, crafted by our own governing ruling class, nearly destroyed America's long free speech history. The enemies of speech had new lingo to justify their authoritarian impulse. It was disinformation, allegedly pushed by nefarious foreign governments, that was the number one threat to our democracy. To protect our democracy, disinformation had to be identified and stamped out. GEC's history shows the pernicious way Washington turns laudable public goals into a means of entrenching its own power and rolling back the freedom of regular Americans. GEC began life in 2011 as the Center for Strategic Counterterrorism Communications. CSCC's purpose was to monitor the narratives of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations and advise the American government on what counter-terrorist narratives to use in response. But this worthy purpose didn't last long. In early 2016, the Obama administration named CSCC the Global Engagement Center, stripping away the explicit focus on international terrorism. Then, after Donald Trump's historic victory in 2016, but before he took office, GEC's mission was expanded to cover any and all, quote, foreign state and non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts, end quote. This pivot was no accident. Obama's man in charge of GEC, Rick Stengel, touted his efforts to protect democracy while redefining it so that democracy came to mean silencing the part of the electorate he doesn't like. In 2019, Stengel directly equated President Trump's campaign with foreign and terrorist propaganda, writing, quote, Trump employed the same techniques of disinformation as the Russians and much the same scare tactics as ISIS, end quote. That same year, Stengel wrote an entire article about, quote, why America needs a hate speech law. I'm not against propaganda, Stengel once said. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population, and I don't necessarily think it's that awful. All too many abuses of trust that occurred at the GEC seem to reflect Stengel's dark founding vision. In 2020, a coronavirus from a Chinese lab swept the globe, and GEC popped up with a report warning that a Russian disinformation apparatus was behind public speculation that the virus was an, quote, engineered bioweapon, or that it existed due to, quote, research conducted at the Wuhan Institute. GEC tarred not only specific claims as foreign propaganda, but also specific users. It created lists of thousands of accounts that were accused of being foreign propaganda vectors simply for sharing articles or even following certain accounts. These lists were sent to social media companies for review, but nobody was fooled. The purpose of this was to pressure private companies in the direction of more censorship and less free speech. GEC was an enthusiastic participant in the Election Integrity Partnership, an infamous group established under the constitutionally questionable conditions to monitor disinformation about the 2020 election. The EIP pretty much exclusively singled out accounts and narratives associated with President Trump and his supporters, and, in fact, directly flagged President Trump's tweets, along with his family members and friends of the administration. GEC was not only one of the top participants in the EIP in terms of flagging content, but it also funded at least one of the EIP's 4 main sponsoring organizations. Indeed, when it wasn't directly nagging social media companies to censor more, the GEC paid private actors to do it for them. With its multi-million-dollar budget paid for by American taxpayers, GEC funneled grants to organizations around the world dedicated to pushing speech restrictions under the guise of fighting disinformation. My choice to publish this piece in The Federalist is no coincidence. One recipient of your taxpayer dollars was a British entity called the Global Disinformation Index, or GDI. GDI once produced a list of the top 10 riskiest online news outlets in a direct bid to drive off their ad revenue and put them out of business. Every one of those 10 sites was on the political right, and the Federalist was among them. Another entity receiving State Department dollars was NewsGuard, a company that rates the reliability of various websites, once again for the purposes of driving traffic and ad revenue away from those rated poorly. NewsGuard claims to be nonpartisan, but its board of advisors has included one Rick Stengel, the very man who built the Global Engagement Center, who says Donald Trump uses ISIS propaganda tactics, and who believes that propagandizing the American people is a good thing. Some of the third-party implementers GEC paid to fight so-called disinformation were downright laughable. One such implementer, which continued to receive funding even after Congress sunset GEC, flagged the Doge dog as a symbol associated with Nazi SS officers. No, I'm not kidding. I wish I were. You know what's delightful about this is I know exactly why that is, because there's a meme out there of the Doge dog dressed up like a Nazi SS officer. Ultimately, the problem wasn't that our government picked the wrong people and NGOs to police disinformation. The problem is that they were picking anybody to do this at all. The entire disinformation industry from its very beginnings has existed to protect the American establishment from the voices of forgotten Americans. Everything it does is the fruit of the poison tree. The hoax that Russian interference, misinformation, and meddling is what caused President Trump's victory in 2016, rather than a winning political message that only he was offering. This travesty has gone on long enough. Our republic is based on putting trust in the ordinary citizenry. Our founding fathers took the bold step of believing that ordinary citizens can sift through information, decide which policies and candidates are best, and vote accordingly. You have to forgive the founding father pablum here. Our disinformation experts reject this thesis and in the process reject our democratic republic itself. If citizens need the government to step in and tell them what is disinformation and what isn't, then power doesn't rest with the people at all. It rests instead with the people who write the propaganda telling the public what to believe. Do you mean to tell me we have the Secretary of State describing the media-occupied state? Huh. The Trump administration rejects this anti-American attitude. The American people don't need an obscure agency to protect them from lies by pressuring X to ban users or trying to put the Federalist out of business. This administration will fight false narratives with true narratives, not with heavy-handed threats decreeing that only one truth be visible online. Finally, as we recommit this country to its core constitutional free speech principles at home, we will remain vigilant abroad, not just against threats from adversaries such as Communist China, but also from less expected countries where authoritarian censorship is gradually strangling true freedom of speech. Less expected countries where authoritarian censorship is gradually strangling true freedom of speech. Oh my God. True freedom of speech. I wonder what he could be talking about. More on that in a little bit. We are not afraid. At her birth, America was a lone beacon of freedom to the world. If necessary, we will happily be that lone beacon once again. And then he actually sat down today for an interview with Mike Benz, which has got to be just surreal for Mr. Frame Game. Got to be surreal for him to have spent all this time talking about the Global Engagement Center and going all over the place. And now here he is interviewing the Secretary of State directly about the shutdown of the Global Engagement Center. So we'll play a little bit of this here. And I'm going to take this moment to dash off to the Tinkle Closet real quick.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being here with sharing for the American people a very momentous day in the history of the State Department and the U.S. government in restoring free speech and America's role as the beacon of free speech. Something very historic transpired today. Could you tell the American people what that was?
Well, we ended government-sponsored censorship in the United States through the State Department, and let me explain how we get there. This started out, 10 years ago with this effort of let's go after the messaging that Al-Qaeda and ISIS and others are putting to radicalize people. Who's going to be against that? That sounds normal. And then it was like in 2016, we had this foreign interference in our election. We need to start targeting some of that stuff. By 2020, it had grown into this movement of like actually going after individual American voices. And one of the ways that was being done wasn't just directly, because the guy that was running this thing, Stengel, was actually a guy that was out there saying, Donald Trump talks just like a Russian spy. He talks just like a terrorist. Right. And so do the people around him. But they were also taking money from this program and using it to fund these NGOs, these third-party groups who were supposed to be like impartial. Those groups were then tagging. They were literally tagging and labeling voices in American politics, Ben Shapiro, the Federalist, others, tagging them as foreign agents. So you look at it and say, American taxpayers, through the State Department, were paying groups to attack Americans and to try to silence the voice of Americans. And there were consequences. These weren't just a label they put on people. Some of these people got deplatformed, they got taken down, they couldn't communicate. So it was outrageous. So before President Trump took over, they disbanded this unit. They just renamed it and moved it somewhere else. But now, over the last few months, we've worked on it and just taken it down. And to the extent we're spending money now, we are going to spend money on messaging. It's going to be pro-American messaging. And it's going to be incentivizing and protecting free speech, which is threatened in all over the world, including countries that are allies of ours. The best way to counter disinformation, if that's what people are thinking is out there, the best way to counter disinformation is free speech, is to make sure that what's true has as equal or greater opportunity to communicate as what's not true. We've learned that the hard way. But when you turn disinformation into a weapon, a political weapon, a label that you can use to go after people you don't like and say, anything that person's saying is disinformation. Well, listen, I read mainstream newspapers every day, or I watch mainstream broadcast every day that I know are disinformation. Okay, we have an issue right now. They keep calling it Maryland man deported to El Salvador. No, not Maryland man, El Salvador citizen deported to El Salvador. That's disinformation. Every day, a U.S. senator yesterday said that this guy was a kidnapped American citizen, and they published it in the article without any fact check. He's not an American citizen. So the important thing is that we have free speech so we can counter that, so we can say this is not true. That's the way you handle that. And, you know, but we have instances now in Western countries where people are being arrested. You've seen this, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
People are out there, they put a post and the cop comes knocking on their door, you're gonna go to jail for 60 days for posting something online.
Right.
You know, this is crazy stuff that's happening. The vice president addressed this in his speech at the Munich conference back in February.
Yes.
So we got a lot of work to do, but the most important thing is we're gonna make sure that as we communicate.
Interesting. They keep bringing this up. Isn't that a, there's a little data point there that keeps popping up. Marco Rubio and JD Vance in particular keep bringing this up, talking about the European countries and their pressure on their censorship pressure they're applying to their people. That's going to come up again here. I'll get to that here in a little bit. Super chat from Slosher. Thank you for the 10 leaf bucks, my friend. He says, Michael Malice called it over a year ago that they would go for the university and they would know how to defend themselves. This is going to be hilarious. Oh, yeah, we definitely haven't heard the end of this. And the universities aren't just going to lay over. They're going to have ways to fight back, and it's going to be fascinating seeing how the administration in turn fights back. Because when you think about the State Department in relationship to some of this stuff, the people who are there are Michael Anton, Darren Beattie, and then you have guys like Elbridge Colby in the Defense Department. There's a number of different people within the establishment that are very well aware, or within the administration, broadly speaking now, who are very keenly aware of this side of the internet, this world. And these are basically all guys who absolutely have read Yarvin at one point or another. So they're keenly aware of the role that the university system plays and how it gets it's embedded into the whole foreign policy establishment, the domestic media establishment, the diplomatic side of foreign policy, the military side of foreign policy. It's infested into all of these things. So this is a rather formidable opponent for the universities to take on, and they're winning the publicity battle very, very well thus far. The administration is, that is. And then wanted to highlight something that Politically Catholic says, can y'all imagine Rush Limbaugh looking down from heaven right now in the first 4 months of Trump? Oh, man. Rush has got to be a happy camper, man.
Communicate to the world, it's going to be pro-American. You know, things that build up what this country's working on and explaining what we're doing, not attacking Americans who are exercising their First Amendment rights.
The classic work of the State Department in the 20th century.
Yeah,
and you mentioned this network that was paid through the State Department through grants and contracts. And my understanding is that network also targeted the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy, Darren Beattie, who I believe played an important role in this restructuring as well. And credit to you and to the Undersecretary. One of the questions that remains, this is obviously amazing news, I think, to the entire American people about the defunding and the restructuring. There are lingering questions about what was done during that period, where we now have so many people wondering, was I censored because of something the State Department did? Was my news organization bankrupted? Were advertisers contacted about it? And there are aggrieved parties. There's an important historical record that needs to be unearthed. There are active lawsuits. There are many reasons for a public disclosure effort on top of this development today. Are there any efforts underway to be able to have a kind of GEC files as there were for the Twitter files?
Yeah, so I think what we have to do now, and Darren will be big involved in that as well, is sort of document what happened. Because one thing is to say it in a broadcast like this, another thing is to actually put it on paper. And there's two reasons to do it. The first is because I think people who were harmed deserve to know that and be able to prove that they were harmed. And then the other is to make sure it never happens again, right? So that 10 years from now, when someone has a brilliant idea like this again, not brilliant idea like this again, you can point to that and say, oh, this was done once before, and here's a reason why we don't. That's why accountability is important in these things, because it doesn't just provide justice, but it also prevents it from happening in the future. You have something you can point to at the same time and say, these are the kinds of things we want to stay away from. And, you know, it's also a very important lesson here. If I take you back 15 years and I ask somebody, do you think we should be doing more to make sure ISIS and Al-Qaeda are not radicalizing people online? 15 years ago, we would have said, yeah, of course. Right. But look what that turned into. Right. And I'm not saying you know, obviously we don't want ISIS radicalizing everybody, but you have to understand that sometimes some idea that starts out as innocuous or maybe even good intention, whatever, can metastasize, becomes a weapon that can be turned into something else by someone else. That's a valuable lesson here. And everything we do, you have to understand that when you create something, what you created and what it turns into are not necessarily the same thing, especially when the people in charge change.
Right. A Frankensteinian monster.
Yeah.
I've been so impressed with Marco Rubio. I understood the reason for his appointment, but I had my expectation was like Trump is really going to have to work overtime to keep him in line. Thus far, he's been. I can't really think of any big complaint that I have about anything that he's said or done or been associated with. And the way he's talking about this now, like I didn't see him as a serious person before. And he's just kind of like this hanger-on that's just kind of following Trump around and the more that I've heard some of his where he sits down and he really talks these things out, he's actually a very smart guy. And whether he's just an extremely savvy political operator or he has genuinely abandoned the whole neocon project, he seems like a completely different man. He's not at all what I expected him to be. Now, my expectations naturally are still measured about him, but you know, in this case, he's not going about this as if he thinks as he's just kind of like doing this token thing that, oh yeah, get rid of the censorship thing, make it a whole big deal, and then keep doing our thing here. Just keep it going behind the scenes. He's actually talking about like, no, we need to document everything that built up here and keep a record of this and maintain an institutional memory that this is not something that the State Department is going to be involved in. Now, whether or not that actually ends up happening, it is sort of irrelevant to me. He's at least talking the talk very, very well. And I saw you guys talking about this, that him as a VP candidate. If I knew that I was going to be going into a coma tomorrow, instead of flying up to Michigan, I would be going into a coma. Those things are a little bit different, I guess. If I knew that I was going to be going into a coma and waking up on election day 2028, and I had to put money on something, I would put money on a Vance Rubio ticket for a whole bunch of different reasons. I'm not going to get into all of them now because there's still a lot we got to get through here today. But I don't think I think that's fairly better than 50-50, I would say.
Takes on a life of its own. So then that is to say you can commit to the American public now that there will be a transparency effort to actually...
Yeah, that's already started. Because I think as part of justifying doing all this, we had to document this, right? So now I think there's more in-depth, and we'll create a process for people at sort of point. We already know some of the higher profile ones, but there are more than higher profile ones, right? There are a lot of other, including everyday individual American citizens who suddenly were labeled. And I think this is going to require some cross-jurisdictional work because some of it's going to require us to go back and prove, okay, somebody got deplatformed in 2021, right? And back in the middle of COVID 2020, someone got deplatformed, and tracking, we can prove that. People can show, hey, I got deplatformed by the old Facebook or by the old Twitter or whatever, but then linking that. So why were they deplatformed? Who told them to deplatform? And if we could somehow, with internal review, create a linkage between some information that came from something the State Department paid for and an actual aggrieved party, that's what's important. Because I think that one thing is to point to the high-profile cases, which we're aware of. But I think when people see that there were actually just individual everyday Americans that were deplatformed and for whatever, silenced because somebody associated with this program identified them, I think that's what's really going to be eye-opening to a lot of people. But we didn't want to wait for that to take action. We know enough to already act. Right. But we obviously want to know the depth and the scope of this. That's going to happen. Yeah, right. It's already happening.
This is a program that has been shrouded in secrecy. Journalists.
He's talking about going back years and making a list and checking it twice, going and sussing out who all was responsible. What sort of institutional capital was directed toward this? What did that look like? How did that happen? Who were the people who were involved in it? sounding a little McCarthy-ish to me, if I do say so myself.
Like Matt Taibbi have tried to FOIA for many of these grants and contracts and have encountered the Stonewall. So this is, I think, amazing news. Yep. I know that you're a very busy man and appreciate all the time here. So the final question is on the international stage. As you are repositioning the State Department to have the U.S. once again be the global beacon for free speech and liberty, we face threats around the world from censorship laws coming out of the European Union, coming out of Brazil, coming out of really a network of countries that have taken the legitimacy of things like the Global Engagement Center and said, oh, it's okay in the Western world to have media literacy programs, information integrity, malinformation programs. And many of those Global Engagement Center ecosystem partners have been involved in the shaping of those foreign laws. Many have been funded by the State Department and USAID, being signatories on the EU Code of Disinformation, implementing the EU Digital Services Act, which was threatened to be turned against Americans when Elon Musk famously had that X-Space with Donald Trump during the election season. So my question to you is there any insights that you can provide to the American people about how the State Department is going to go about, once again, restoring free speech in a world where we are facing foreign threats from the European Union and Brazil and other places to Americans' ability to talk?
Yeah, so the first thing, obviously, is our number one priority is Americans. So we don't want to see an American who happens to be living in London or happens to be living in Europe post something online about American politics or any politics, and all of a sudden they're facing ramifications over there, or they're denied entry, and something happens, oh, we're denying them into our country, or we're going to arrest them because they posted something while living overseas. So our number one interest is the impact it has on Americans. The broader point, which is the one I think the Vice President made very clear in Munich at the security conference, and people freaked out about what he said, but it's true. What is it that links us with Western Europe? What is it that links us with these? It's our shared values. And one of those shared values, we hope, is freedom of expression. I know they don't have a First Amendment, but freedom of expression, right? And if that is eroded, if suddenly these become places where people are targeted because of what they said or what their opinion is, then one of the pillars of our shared interest, beyond military cooperation and everything else, is under attack. And I think you made a very vibrant point that in some ways you are attacking, by attacking freedom of expression, you are attacking one of the pillars of our shared interest, our shared culture, our shared values. And so I think we've raised that. I mean, I can tell you we were at an Oval Office meeting with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and this issue came up. So this has been raised. It becomes part of our diplomatic situation that we raise when we interact with foreign interlocutors. I think what's troubling is we understand, like, that's always going to be an issue when certain countries around the world, but when you're dealing with Western European allies, and that's who you're talking to about this stuff, it really tells you how far it's gone and how big a problem it is. So that's a new thing for us to have to raise in those capitals, but we do it, and we do it everywhere. And I personally witnessed the President and the Vice President raise it with multiple foreign leaders. And I think you're going to continue to see an emphasis on that in our diplomacy and what we talk about.
That's fantastic. And I think the actions today will send a message to those foreign bodies that what was done for a very brief period here, really in the scope of our history, is not a legitimate way to pursue international laws. And just on the EU Digital Services Act, I'd feel remiss if I didn't mention that the EU commissioning body there threatened Elon Musk, a non-EU citizen, talking to Donald Trump, a non-EU citizen
during the campaign in October,
and threatened them specifically not to talk about the unrest, the street protests in the UK at the time. The UK is no longer a member of the EU, so the EU was threatening, and today we're hearing they're threatening $1 billion in fines against X for non-compliance with disinformation. And we've seen the head of their commission target non-EU citizens, talking to non-EU citizens about non-EU territories. And so this is just one of these things, as this code becomes mandatory in July, to know that the State Department is focused on protecting free speech both within and without is I think, an important thing.
Well, just beyond Elon, if a country or a group of countries, in the case of the EU, although it considers itself sort of a country because these countries have given over a significant amount of sovereignty in order to become a member of the EU, when you have foreign...
These are the sorts of things I'm talking about. Like, he doesn't have to make these little kind of tangential mentions and stuff, but when he does, you get a peek into his brain. He is not someone who subscribes to the Fukuyama orthodoxy. Oh, the EU? Of course, the EU. Oh, the sacred EU. No, he's like, yeah, they kind of like, they're the sort of this weird organization that, like, they kind of think they're a country because all these countries have ceded over their sovereignty. And man, sure was stupid of those countries because now look what the EU is doing. Like, you could see this thinking in his head. This is the perspective of the administration. The EU is not a legitimate governing body. The EU is going to die, at least during Trump's term. During this term here, I suppose the next one could be Trump's term as well. Before 2030, there is going to be no more EU. And this is leading into more about this conversation after this clip. But I wanted to make sure you got this part of this clip because I guess you could quibble and you could say there's a whole rabbit hole I could go down on this, but I don't have time for it today. But this idea of ethnogenesis happening and what the American ethnicity, if you start evaluating it, what is it truly, and what is different about the American ethnicity that sets it apart from the British people or the Anglos, more broadly speaking. And so he says the only thing that connects us to these allies is our shared values. So he's diminishing the racial connection, which you might think, oh, well, that's not good. But at the same time, there's a utility in this, where if he's like, if we don't have these shared values, then we can't be allies anymore. And if he's ready to carve off American sovereignty vis-a-vis Europe like that, I'm not going to fight against that. I think this is good. I think that's a. I may not agree with the reason why, but I agree with the ultimate end of it, because this is going to happen organically. So what this is leading into is we're going to talk about the economy stuff here in just a little bit with some comments from Scott Bessent and then from Matt Pines at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. But what this is, you're starting to get a little peek here into the terms that the administration is negotiating upon in the midst of these currency trade deal accords that are starting to play out over the next 90 days and will continue probably through most of the rest of this year. One of the negotiating levers they're using through the State Department is, if you want better trade terms with us, then you need to tamp down the censorship. You need to tamp down this communist authoritarian bullshit. We will lean on you economically to break you if that's the way you're going to lead your country, and we will amplify movements against your atheist communist orthodoxy if that's necessary. Which is, I had such high expectations for this administration, but they continue to outdo. They continue to. They're able to not just like walk and chew gum at the same time, but they're like walking and chewing gum and juggling and having multiple conversations at the same time. Which, to me, if they're going to take on this many different fronts, all in a coordinated effort spanning the entire term, then I don't need them to have a 100% success rate on everything. Like, you could either get the administration that picks one single issue and aims for a 100% success rate on that issue, and then they either fall short or they don't. Or you could get the administration that's going to take on all these different issues, and they're not going to get a 100% success rate on any of them, but they're going to make a lot of ground on all of them. I would gladly take the latter one.
Foreign entities taking actions that go after Americans for speech. Yes. That becomes a foreign policy irritant for the United States, and more than an irritant. It becomes an impediment in some cases to cooperate when they're going, not just after a high-profile person like Elon, but anybody for that matter. I mean, I think if you extend this out, you could see it, threatening commentators, threatening people that are opining about world events, potentially threatening office holders in the United States. Right. I mean, so what if a American political figure, on the left or right, criticized something that was happening in Europe? Imagine right now if all these people freaking out over Bukele in El Salvador were suddenly being threatened by some Western Hemisphere version of the EU. Oh, we're going to come after you because you're attacking the president of El Salvador. The left would be freaking out. Right. So I think that this is a very legitimate issue for us to raise as a bilateral, or in this case with the EU, irritant in our foreign policy. It has to become part of one of the things that we raise when we interact with them, about the impact this is having on American citizens. At the end of the day, the number one priority of the State Department is to serve the national interest of the United States and the interest of the American people. We work for the American people. Right. It's the United States Department of State. Yes. So that we need to return that principle in everything we do, including this.
Right, and this is such a fair and
to refer back to the whole debate between the Americhuds and the Euro Bros or something like that. A lot of these guys had this mistaken impression that Trump's job was to come in and to just declare victory and then become genteel and grandfatherly and just I don't know, use all of his soft skills to just draw everyone to him magnetically, and all the European leadership would just drop their plans for global domination and they'd just be kind of sucked into his orbit. In reality, if you want to see the European leadership class be disempowered, the best way that the U.S. government can do that while maintaining consistent with the America First mandate is by being extremely proactive about protecting the interests of American companies and American commentators and American citizens, even overseas. Because what happens if you have Americans who are in these other countries living there, and they're free and able to talk about whatever they want because Uncle Sam will be breathing down your neck if you do something to to an American citizen. Well, now you've just created a real distinct inequity between the American citizens and the European citizens, the citizens of the so-called European nations. So you've just amped up the demand for equal treatment from the citizens of the European nations as they look at how the American people are being treated better with respect to their government. And by using trade means to lean against these countries and induce them to back off on the censorship regimes, you increase the capacity for right-wing movements in those countries to rise up. This is the best way to approach the current state of play between the European leadership, the great villains on the planet right now, and the Trump administration. You don't like try to schmooze and like play their game with them. You just lean against them. You use the levers that you have to just lean against them. And they're going to create the openings for you guys to actually do something about it over there. Those opportunities are going to come. But if you're too busy complaining about Trump being mean and chaotic and trying to break globalism too abruptly or whatever, well, then you might miss your opportunities.
Frankly, merciful way of doing this as well. Sounds like you don't want the power to go after the other side for misinformation and things like this.
Oh, we would be here all day. Yeah, I could build a whole building to go after that. Right, exactly. But the best way to do it is just to say they're lying, here's the truth.
Right.
That's why we have things like this today.
Right.
And that's why we're able to interact with you and others. That's the best way to do it. And it's annoying, don't get me wrong. I mean, they say things that aren't true. Every day stuff is leaked in the press that's reported on as fact, and it's not fact. Right. Or stuff is reported in commentary, not if the commentators say what they want. Mainstream newspapers and mainstream media outlets report things as fact that are completely not true. So our approach to that is not shut them down, not fine them. Right. Our approach to that is to say they're lying. Here's the truth. Right. It's harder. It's annoying, but that's the best way to do it. If you don't do it that way, then you recognize that someday in the future, if you create this power to shut that down, someone in my position will do it to us. Right. And I just think that begins to devolve very rapidly, as we've seen with this experiment that they did.
You're putting the censorship gun down, and the American people are incredibly grateful for it. So thank you so much.
That was the right thing to do.
Today.
Thank you. And thanks for your attention to this topic. I know you've been on this a long time.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
The great Marco Grande, ladies and gentlemen. Now, continuing with this theme. Oh, hold on. Let me hit a couple of these super chats here. Slosher said, "OMG, Trump really is going to save the West." Yes, indeed, he is. All will thank him in retrospect. And then $5 super chat from Mr. Ryan Isaac. Thank you, my friend. He says, "So Matt, all else being equal, does Trump Vance have my back if I go abroad to Europe?" I would say yes. I would say at this point, it may have to, I don't know, it may have to get escalated far beyond where it's comfortable for you before it gets onto their radar. And who knows? But perhaps you wind up being the political football that the Accords end up being named after you or something because you're the thing that causes the whole rigmarole to kick off, and then everyone's talking about how whatever European nation has kidnapped Ryan Isaac and family, and Marco Rubio is going over there to negotiate your release. This could be pretty good. Maybe we can make a movie about it later on. Politically Catholic says, Matt, millennials as a generation are multitaskers. This newfound ability to multitask is a product of generational overturn. MOG, millennial occupied government. Now I like this. This is my new recreational belief. I have officially declared it to be so. This is proof of the millennial occupied government. This is proof why you are all being mogged. It's because of our generational capacity for multitasking, which is probably because of it goes along with the generational capacity for ADHD. So continuing with this theme, Andrew Torba says, thank you to JD Vance. Mr. Vice President, thank you, sir. From The Independent, Starmer told the UK must repeal hate speech laws to protect LGBT plus people or lose Trump trade deal. Good chance of agreement, says JD Vance, but sources say his concerns over Britain's hate speech laws are still a red line. So we're getting further confirmation that this is an explicit point of negotiation with the administration, at least with respect to the European nations. If you want a trade deal with us, if you want access to our energy markets, if you want to maintain your protection under our security umbrella, then you're going to have to repeal the hate speech laws that protect the gays. From the article, but allies of Mr. Vance say he is, quote, obsessed by the fall of Western civilization, end quote. Our guy, he's literally me, including his view that free speech is being eroded in Britain and that he will demand the Labour government rolls back laws against hateful comments, including abuse targeting LGBT plus groups or other minorities, as a condition of any deal. How do the Black Pillars do it, man? Like, how do they possibly come up with reasons to be upset? Taylor Brown saying faggots back on the menu, boys. Listen, you whiny limeys. Our vice president, beard and all, is going to enable you guys to say gay and faggot and retarded and nigger on the internet. He's helping make it possible for you while you sit around and cry. So just be aware of that fact. We are sacrificing for you. We've sent our vice president to tell your queer prime minister to get bent so that gamer words are allowed. Okay, and this leads into this this bit of this interview with Bessent, Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary. I did this interview on Yahoo yesterday, and he gave us some more hints at what exactly it is they're looking for from the Chinese, what they're expecting this negotiation will bear out. He had a number of different interesting things he mentions in here, but there's a couple things that I'll pull out and emphasize. So this is from Yahoo Finance. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talks tariffs, taxes, and concerns about an economic slowdown. The whole thing is very good, as most of his interviews are. You can kind of see if you follow his interviews, you can see him sort of working out some of his talking points in real time. But if you want to go listen to the whole thing, then you can just go to the King Pilled Substack, kingpilled.substack.com. And when I finish the show here today, I will upload the episode, and it'll have all the links that I go through today. So here is Scott Bessent.
Foreign accumulation of 10-year and 30-year bonds.
Of course, as you know, Mr. Secretary, China is the second largest holder of treasuries, and some would say they could retaliate by selling treasuries given how things are going on the trade front. Does that keep you up at night, the fact that the Chinese could sell treasuries and impact negatively our economy?
I could burn down my house if I had an argument with my spouse, but it's not going to do me very much good. So
that was very poetic. I could burn down my house if I had an argument with my spouse, but it's not going to do me very much good. And that's like, is that like perfect? What's it called? Iambic pentameter. The rhyme, the meter of it was all just perfect. The syllables. Now you notice he is a very distinguished, proper gay. He knows that it's not proper for a man to talk about his husband. He may have one. He's going to keep his husband to himself. He has a spouse.
If they started selling treasuries, they would, they'd have an effect on the price. But more importantly, they accumulate dollars. And what are they going to do with the dollars? So if they sell treasuries, then they would have to buy RMB, and it would strengthen their currency. And they've been doing just the opposite. They've had a weak RMB or yuan, the policy. So it really serves no purpose for them to weaponize treasuries.
If you saw them trying to weaponize.
So he's basically saying that the idea that they would begin dumping treasuries to try to hurt us would actually reflect back around, and it would hurt them because of the nature of how they've structured their currency in the first place. Which is why he has continually said, if we get into a trade war, us as the net importing country is going to have the upper hand against the net exporting country. Because they have an incentive to keep their currency artificially low with respect to ours. They're artificially weakening their currency compared to our currency. But if they want to start dumping U.S. treasuries, they're going to be buying dollars, and then they're going to be having to convert those into RMB. So they're going to strengthen their currency. Now, it's interesting that he has said this a couple of times now, that they saw at the recent auctions, they saw why does this freaking page keep crashing? They actually saw a net increase in foreign buyers. And I'm curious, I don't have the first clue of how to go, if there's a way to go check that or figure it out or whatever. But I'm curious to know how, like what the players are there. If there are, because there definitely has been foreign buyers who are dumping treasuries. There's also been a lot of domestic investors who are getting unwound. But there definitely have been foreign buyers who are dumping treasuries, and I wonder who is buying and offsetting that. I don't know if that's even possible to figure out, but I'd be curious to know from someone who knows.
Treasuries. How does the Treasury Secretary respond?
Look, we have a big toolkit. We do buybacks. The Federal Reserve, I think if treasuries hit a certain level, or if the Federal Reserve believed that a foreign, I won't call them an adversary, but a foreign rival, were weaponizing the U.S. government bond market or attempting to destabilize it for political gain, I am sure that we would do something in conjunction with each other, but we just haven't seen that.
So a couple interesting things that come out of that. Number one, he immediately says, yeah, if they were to start doing that, then yeah, the Treasury can just buy it back, which is technically not QE. The Treasury can just buy those back. He also says basically the Fed can do it as well. And so if something like that was to happen, then we would probably do something in conjunction with it. And he frames it as to prevent people from weaponizing the U.S. Treasury market. But a little kind of a subtle thing in there is, yeah, we would probably do something in conjunction with each other. He and Powell he's made it abundantly obvious that he and Powell are completely simpatico. They go to breakfast once a week together. They're absolutely on the same page.
You mentioned tariffs. We're less than 90 days out from the tariff pause ending, Mr. Secretary. How many deals do you envision being done by the time that pause would lift?
Yeah, well, Brian, let's set aside China. There are 15 large trading partners. We set aside China. There are 14. And we're in rapid motion and setting up our process for the 14 largest trading partners, most of whom have very large deficits. So in 90 days, are we going to have a complete a formal legal document done and dusted? Not likely, but I think if we follow the process, we could have substantial clarity on those 14 away from China in terms of agreements and.
Okay, yeah. So he's saying basically we're not necessarily going to have like a perfectly signed agreement and everything, but we're going to have substantial progress. So the way they've broken this down, there's the 75 countries that have reached out to them about negotiations. Then they've taken the top 15 trading partners that they have. China is one of them, so they set China aside. They've taken the other 14. They're in contact with them. Majority of them have substantial deficits as well. So they are also majority import economies. So you could probably put a list together and figure out which precisely which countries he's looking at. But they're creating a network of all of these countries that are all chained together through these different trade agreements, and they're going to unify with the United States at the center of it to ensure they all have favorable terms to prevent China from trying to end run around any of the negotiations they have with China. So the goal is not to isolate China in the long term. The goal is to wedge China off right now, negotiate something with everyone else, and once that's negotiated, then China basically you've got leverage over them. It's just a
principle.
It's just a big leverage play.
And then once we reach a level that we've agreed on, and they've agreed to lower their tariffs, lower their non-tariff barriers, currency manipulation, and subsidies of industry and labor, then I think we can move forward.
The other thing he mentions here, so everyone talks about tariffs, and then they don't know what a tariff is, and there was blah blah blah. Everyone spazzed out. It very clearly they have an operating principle of what they're looking at here. They're using the term tariff broadly to refer to all the different ways that you could manipulate your trade relationship with another country. So you can manipulate your currency. You can put up tariff, but like putting up tariffs is like the bluntest instrument. You can manipulate your currency. And then the other one was subsidizing your capital or your labor markets. So as a government, you're artificially manipulating the structure or the composition of your markets to create the structural pressures that will result in a trade deficit or surplus, as however the case may be. So they're looking at all of this comprehensively, which is necessary when you're dealing with a people who are motivated by a desire to exploit every system that they're in and define the weak points and to try to maximize them for personal gain at any cause.
Would tariffs still be in place, though, as part of any agreement?
Depend on what they have on offer. I'm telling everyone, bring your A game. And also, they should all know, for the big countries, President Trump wants to be involved.
What does a...
So he's not going to show his hand. He's answered this question the same way multiple times. They say, well, could tariffs still be involved? Like, are we going to have like this flat 10% tariff? And he's like, no, I'm not going to negotiate on, I think he says this later in this here. Like, I'm not going to negotiate on a large platform. I'm not going to reveal our hand. The tariffs, he says, bring your A game. Come negotiate. And the people who negotiate first get the best deal.
First mover get?
Well, traditionally, first mover gets the best deal. So I'd encourage everyone to come fast and come with a great deal.
Have you talked to your counterpart in China?
We did an introductory call a couple of months ago. We haven't spoken since. I'm not sure who from PRC will be. Next week is a big week in Washington. It's the International Monetary Fund World Bank Week. So I know that People's Republic will send someone from finance, probably the PBOC, People's Bank of China governor. So they will be here. I may bump into them. We don't have anything scheduled.
How much is the president willing to go beyond 145% tariffs on China, or is that the ceiling?
Look, I think no one thinks that these are sustainable.
Well, since this was recorded, they've actually gone to 245%. So the answer was yes, but Bessent gives the same answer he's given multiple times as well, which is he's so freaking good at this. The surface question is he willing to go beyond 145%? And he pivots it to, no one thinks these are sustainable. We're not going to keep this way forever. It's a tool to be used as a negotiating tactic, and we're going to use it until we don't need to.
Over the long run. But with President Trump, I'm not going to give away his negotiating strategy on a widely viewed network like Yahoo. So I think as a president...
A widely viewed network like Yahoo. I didn't even know Yahoo Finance still existed.
Trump, he gets maximum strategy because he keeps everything on the table all the time.
What I imagine can't help, Mr. Secretary, is that on his trip to Vietnam, China President Xi Jinping said tariffs, quote, are unilateral bullying. I mean, I can't imagine that helps this process at all.
Look, also, I think the Chinese trade minister said the tariffs were a joke. And I don't know, maybe Chinese have a different sense of humor than I do, but I don't think there's anything funny about it. But I also don't think there's anything funny about the intellectual property theft that they've done, the blockage that we've had on reciprocal trade with them, the tariffs that they put on, the subsidies that they do for labor, for industry. So I don't see anything funny about it.
What's the best endgame scenario for the relationship with the U.S. and China in terms of tariffs?
Well, Brian, for your viewers, and I used to teach economic history, so if you just give me a moment or two, there were a lot of big trade and currency deals in the 1980s. President Reagan did Japan auto deals. Then there was something called the Plaza Accord, the Louvre Accord, and what was important and different about those was in the 80s, our economic rivals were our military allies. So most of the Europeans and the Japanese, and that there was the Soviet Union, and then China, but China really wasn't a force back then. What's very different this time, and we are in uncharted waters here, is for the first time, our largest economic rival is also a military rival. So we are going to have to deal with this in a different way. Now, I think that the Chinese, I think they would acknowledge, but they've been reluctant to do it, and every macroeconomist who follows China, who I know, believes that the Chinese need to do a big rebalancing. They are the most unbalanced.
This is the really important part here. Talking about this unbalancing that they need to go through, and think of. I'll elaborate on this after he says it, but he makes a comparison between what the end state, what the visualized end state for China is compared to the visualized end state for the United States.
Economy in the history of the modern world, and they favor production and manufacturing over consumer. And relative to their share of world population, relative to their share of GDP, they export more than any other country ever has. So the first contour of a deal would be for them to take steps to increase consumption, help households, and stop the subsidy to the manufacturing sector. And so, a good deal would look like they rebalance toward more consumption, less state subsidized manufacturing. In the US, we have a bit less consumption, and we bring back a manufacturing base, and that could work very well together in a symmetric way. But we haven't seen any interest on their side to do that.
Sounds like a lot needs to be done, Mr. Secretary, to reach a deal with China.
Look, these are two big economies. I think the good news at the end of the day is that President Trump, Chairman Xi have a lot of respect for each other. They've been in contact before, and they've done deals together.
The market has gotten excited because...
So, what they're in broad strokes, their ideal end state here is that Americans consume less, but have American industry subsidized more, while Chinese citizens consume more and have their industry subsidized less. And taken in light of, like, so what does it mean for them to encourage to assist their citizens to consume more? What we're really seeing, if you kind of zoom out on this is like America is going to become a little bit more structurally like China, and China is going to become a little bit more structurally like the United States. So there's going to be because China is such a large net exporter, they're basically they've gone like completely over the top on mass production, and they've just got like conveyor belts that are just launching shit out at everyone. Everyone's like, all right, you guys got to chill out. You need to keep some of this, all this production, all this stuff you're producing. You're just launching it at everyone and destabilizing the rest of all these different networks because you're crowding everybody out of every other market. And you're doing this by artificially constraining your own citizens. So you need to loosen up on your own people a little bit, encourage them, raise their standards of living, encourage them to consume more, allow them to consume more, maintain some of your production within your own borders, which is going to mean you're not going to be able to maintain the currency peg that you have right now. And you're going to open up the market more and allow other countries to be able to come in as players to produce more. Now, I don't think the idea here is for America to become a net exporter. I don't think that a lot would have to change structurally to make that happen, make that possible. I think the goal here is for America to become a net exporter of certain things more so than they are now, to change that ratio. And then we're going to get into this next clip here, that gives some more of a vision sort of what end state they're negotiating toward, what they're envisioning. This is from the podcast, The Bitcoin Layer, with guest Matt Pines, Executive Director of the Bitcoin Policy Institute. And we're going to play a decent chunk of this one. I'm hoping that it's not going to spaz out on me. It's going to let me just stream it on YouTube. So I'm going to... I saw you guys talking about the speed in there earlier. So we're going to go up to 1 1/4. Apologize to those of you if it makes it too fast. I listen to everything on 2.3 on YouTube since they enabled you to go beyond 2. So I'll just adjust it to whoever complains the most, I'll adjust in your direction. But here this first section is understanding the Bretton Woods reimagined. This is from the episode called on the Bitcoin Layer is the channel. The episode is called America's Big Move: How Tariffs and Treasuries Are Changing Everything.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Layer. I'm Nick Bhatia. Today we welcome back Matt Pines, Bitcoin Policy Institute. Matt, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Now, I want to ask you today about Bretton Woods reimagined, the Mar-a-Lago Agreement. What does it look like to you? Is Bitcoin involved? And perhaps you can start with your big picture take on the recent action from Washington. It's being labeled as a reciprocal tariffs or a trade war, but we're of the belief that there's a much bigger plan. So can you give us your thoughts?
Yes, I'd say stepping back, there's a combination between elements of the administration that have come into office with the master plan, so to speak, and there are elements of the administration that have other objectives that aren't necessarily according with some master strategy. And so the implementation, it doesn't always match up with, say, someone's master strategy. I think that's kind of what you've seen is kind of this people kind of, it's a Rorschach test, right? Do you perceive there's some hidden plan underneath the chaos? Is the chaos just pure chaos? Is it someone trying to attempt to execute a plan? And of course, all plans don't survive. So I'll kind of give my interpretation of what I think core elements of the administration coming in. Secretary Bessent, Steve Moran, and others kind of had in mind, and they might still have in mind, but obviously the real world, right, doesn't necessarily accord with your sort of whiteboard and your white papers. So that's kind of just a brief caveat. But it's also clear to me that trade wars are somewhat slower processes, right? Ultimately, you're talking about trying to structurally shift the decision-making behind businesses, locations of supply chains, consumer preferences, and ultimately, the balance of competitive advantage across different nations. And that's a long process. And so, in principle, the outcomes of a trade war are not going to be decided for months, if not years. But the declaration of a trade war immediately triggers essentially capital wars and currency wars. And capital war essentially is capital flows, right? So trying to weaponize or induce the rapid movement of capital flows, right, from certain financial assets and related financial markets to others as a means of providing pressure on certain decision makers or shifting asset prices rapidly. And then currency wars, which are the most kind of acute, manifestation of sort of economic war, right? We're ultimately trying to weaponize, other instruments of national power to attack, say, currency pegs, right? In this case, the Chinese yuan peg, right? So there's lots of layers to what we've seen just in the past two weeks that we've seen sort of triggered, right? Declaration of a trade war immediately led to both sort of capital wars, capital flows, and massive dislocations in asset markets. And then there's a heavy currency component, right? Between the US dollar, cross exchange rate, in particular with the RMB and the Japanese yen. So that's kind of just the last few weeks of how you see these dynamics start to interplay. But zooming out, right, there's a strategic logic that's well, why did this all happen? Why did everything, why did the White House decide to come out and, flip the tables over, right? And I think it was motivated by a strategic orientation that's shared by everyone on the Trump team, that they want to reset the terms of the global economic and security order.
Okay. They want to reset the terms of the global economic and security order. We'll pick up from there here in just a moment. I want to give a pause every now and then just to ensure the stream keeps up. But Politically Catholic said, are you all able to see my messages of the Chinese emperor publicly unaliving Appalachian overdose manufacturers? No, those are not coming through. That's very interesting. I noticed that you did say, I was trying to understand how you picked up on this, and it makes sense now if one of your messages was being pulled back. It says, he said that's good for his public image in China too, because the culture despises drugs even more than 90s Christian moms did or do. And then you said, Xi has an incredible cult of personality, just like Trump. Americans completely miss that. His cult is dedicated to rooting out corruption. The people love it every time he does a political purge. They're all crooks, so he doesn't have to work very hard. What you see Trump doing with Doge, Xi has been doing for years with his corruption purges. Sure, he sticks just as vile crooks loyal to him back in, but still. And that is part of why I suspect that the we could see your messages about Vance's lurker burner. We could see those messages, but it was just specifically the things regarding unaliving Appalachians that did not come through. What was I gonna say? I suspect that, again, I've said in multiple shows that I don't think that there's actually as much direct hostility between the Trump administration and the leadership of China and between Trump and Xi specifically. I think they're actually kind of using each other as an opportunity to they're treating each other as a big bad boogeyman to give them the opportunity to do drastic things that normally would fall outside the realm of available toolkit to them. So they're able to reach outside their normal toolkit because they've created this crisis, and they're both standing up to each other, and then this is going to ultimately play out as a legitimate negotiation. But they're blustering and using this actually as a way to disentangle them each in their own respective ways from this suicide pact that they've been signed up for, that's dooming both of their nations. So I think there is a strong parallel there, and I don't think that I think a lot of the hostility, the public hostility, is much more bluster than anything else. When you guys know Slutty Milk, I can't see your message, the faggot message. It is coming through, and I've seen a few other guys who've said it, so I don't know that it's necessarily censoring it directly. But Taylor Brent says this guy sounds like Jesse Eisenberg. Yeah, he does.
Fundamentally, they have a view that the U.S. has been providing essentially a public good to the world, and essentially its security zone that it enforces with its military and intelligence and related capabilities, and those come at great cost to the American taxpayer, and lead to increase of our deficit. And so the beneficiaries of that security zone need to pay for it. And in particular, mercantilist nations that have able to climb the value chain and become great powers in their own right, aka China, essentially have been free riders on that security zone and are now weaponizing essentially that public good, that global trading system against us, right? And that the parity now that has been reached pretty quickly between the U.S. and China on key strategic domains, especially military domains, is leading the U.S. to fundamentally reassess the value proposition and the risk-reward proposition of maintaining this sort of security zone commitment and provision of related goods. Now, that's kind of their orientation. Well, I'm not saying whether it's correct or not, but their vision, essentially, the security zone that they're providing, essentially the public good, needs to be paid for. And so they, one, want to threaten to contract the security zone against those that don't want to pay for it, and essentially demarcate around that security zone certain privileges. If you want to be inside that security zone where you get access to that protection, but you also maybe get access to our advanced technology, like our frontier AI and component computational and inference networks, as well as the underlying semiconductor supply chains, you have to kind of pay to join that club. If you also want to be free of these punitive tariffs, you have to join that club. So it's kind of a tech tariff and security zone that they want to demarcate around the world, and that essentially gets funded and also reinforces a monetary zone. So within that zone, right, the dominant reserve asset is a treasury security, and those participants in that club essentially have to pay an entry fee or a membership fee, and we want to essentially impose that fee via the treasury market in some way, right? And so this basic concept of swaps, right, FX swaps, gold swaps for longer dated bonds. So you help the core, right, of this essentially hierarchical semi-imperial system fund those public goods, fund the technology ecosystem that provides strategic benefits to all of its members. But the way that gets funded by the members in the periphery is essentially helping this hegemon term out its increasingly unsustainable debts. And so we have a crisis at the core of a weakening defense industrial base against strategic challengers. We have insecurity in the global security order, and we have an intense technology competition, and we have rising debts and poor demographics. And so we need to essentially constrict to kind of keep the energy in that system and make it a bit more explicit, the terms of entry. So that's kind of their vision behind the global security and economic competition. Essentially, a security zone somewhat demarcates a monetary zone, and those are like mutually reinforcing sort of geoeconomic concepts. And they're reappraising the sort of foundational assumptions that have undergirded the system that we all grew up in, right? It was sort of Pax Americana in the post-Soviet collapse era, and the basic premise was, we'll bring China up into the system in the same way that we brought Germany and Japan up into that system. And we sort of would allow the sort of developing markets to run structural surpluses. We would sort of absorb those surpluses, running deficits, essentially to help bring them up as industrial powers, and generally speaking, contribute to globalization, trade, et cetera, economic growth. When we ran the same play with China, that was sort of like the next logical conclusion. This is the massive market that's going to drive globalization. The critical distinction is we didn't have troops garrisoned inside China, right? Unlike where we had troops garrisoned inside Germany and Japan. And effectively, we could, if there was ever these imbalances got out of control, we could kind of come in with a bit of the hegemonic coercive force to kind of reset terms, right? We've seen those that happen both in 1971, right? We've gone through a number of these resets where the U.S. doesn't really like the imbalances that are built up, and we decide to basically rug the world and use our military force to effectively force them to sort of take it. We did that obviously with the Plaza Accords in some fashion as well. But you can't do that with China, right? Ultimately, like you can't coerce China to just eating the losses. And so it's a much more of an evenly matched game where the core has decided that the system is not working in its interest and wants to reset the system on terms that it favors. But of course, China has its own levers of power and its own interests. And so now we're seeing this fundamentally new U.S.-China competition dynamic play out at a different, more intense level. And the last point I'll say before I sort of stop the rant is, folks, we'll obviously focus on trade wars and obviously the financial assets that were affected and people repricing in a whole bunch of, instabilities and volatility across different financial markets. But national leaders look at these things as just like different levers on their dashboard. And so each of them can just choose to sort of escalate, either vertically, meaning a tit for tat, say on tariffs, where we just slap an additional X% and sort of vertical escalation in that domain, or horizontal escalation, right? I'll cut off rare earth materials, right? Or I'll increase our export controls, or I'll tighten the screws, do more sanctions. So now we're in a domain of sort of economic warfare and integrated statecraft, where the leaders can decide at a given point whether to retaliate vertically or horizontally in, the financial or economic sphere. And then ultimately, right, if you get to this point where there are escalations that go beyond pure economic warfare, then you get to displays of outright military aggression as a means of intimidating the other side. Because this is fundamentally not a matter of macroeconomic models or forecasts for GDP growth or inflation prints. It's fundamentally a matter of geopolitical coercion between great powers. And that's a psychological element between national leaders. Who feels like they have the reserves of strength, who can sort of mitigate their perceived weaknesses, internal as well as external, and can they essentially force the other side to back down? Can they intimidate them to accepting a concession? Is there an off-ramp that gives folks, a sense of face? So that's kind of where we are right now, right? There's lots of things happening.
The first few months of the new administration.
So, very well delivered. It's a lot, but he explains it very well. It says, Phil says here, long bonds for foreigners, short duration for locals. Just like we said, we called it, y'all. Yes, and it's very interesting that we'll come back to this here in just a moment. But it's very interesting that I talked after the election about, I think it was after the election when I first started talking about it, how there's like the three categories of people. You've got the friends, you've got the allies, and you've got the enemies. And that's very similar to Scott Bessent's green, yellow, and red. So the green nations are the nations that are like your closest allies, the ones that you have the best trade relationship. You're completely on the same page, total same values, whatever. Those are the closest allies. And then it's like El Salvador is a green nation. Then you have the yellow nations, which I'd imagine that a lot of I'd imagine like Japan is probably another green nation. The yellow nations is frankly most of the European nations right now are somewhere between yellow and red. And so essentially the United States was built up as this so-called empire that was really just a front for the pre-existing imperial interests, and the US is like the muscle that maintains the trade routes. Well, now the United States under Trump's leadership are saying we're actually going to take this domain that we've been saddled with being responsible for. We'll continue being responsible for it, but you're going to have to pay for it. No more of this just we get gutted and stuck with the bill. If you guys want to retain having us foot the bill for your militaries and protect all of the trade routes for you and be on call to be global policeman and whatever else, if you want that, okay, sure, we're fine providing that service to you, but only if you pay for it. And how are you going to pay for it? Well, you're going to give us favorable debt terms and you're going to help us. It's in your interest to help us build our way out of this debt spiral that we're falling into, because you want to retain that military protection. You want to be able to have that security umbrella. You want to have the infrastructure of the financial system. And going forward, as we onshore all of this technology and begin developing the massive data infrastructure, we want to be the crypto capital of the world. We want to have all the AI innovation and chips manufacturing and everything is all going to come from here. So accessing the market, accessing the American consumer market is not all that is up for grabs. It's not just the consumer market. It's going to be the global financial system payment rails and the energy infrastructure that's going to be developed here. So there's a bubble that's being created. And within that bubble, you have access to the military protection, the technology infrastructure, transnational technological infrastructure, data capacity, servers, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're also going to get the military protection for being a part of that. But the only way that you get all these terms is if you come negotiate with them with us, and effectively it's us dictating to you what's going to work for us, and you figure out how to make that work for you. And China is going to be the most difficult to negotiate with this with, and the only way that you can actually get to that point is by negotiating it out with everyone else first and coming to the table where China has a constrained number of options available to them. So it's going to be a different sort of global order. That's the thing, is like once you've hit that globalism thing, it's going to continue to be globalism, but it's going to be a more localized globalism where you have stronger local power projection capacity and a greater recognition of individual identities. Because like the only way this whole thing works is if you establish that America is a sovereign nation. And just as America has exported the dollar system, we're also going to export the concept of national sovereignty. You will actually get the right to be a sovereign nation, even if you're really small. Even if you don't have the military capacity to go head-to-head with anyone else, you'll get to be a sovereign nation because we are monetizing the delivery of sovereign nation status. Let's continue with this here. Almost forgot to share the screen.
BL for 15% off of your order. Thank you for explaining the mercantilist side and why it is a China issue when we boil it down. So what Pines has cited repeatedly already in these first 10 minutes is the Steve Myron speech that he gave at the Hudson Institute on April 7th. That speech, which we have covered extensively at the Bitcoin layer, and we continue to cite it, it's one of the foundational framework outlays that we have access to. So we have to refer to it and understand that the dual public good that Myron is talking about is a combination of the defense umbrella that Matt Pines is describing for us, plus the reserve currency function. So that's the dual public good. That's the Steve Myron speech. He is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors for the White House, and that is an important person to listen to. We also had Dr. Myron on late last year, and we are hoping to bring him back, which is very exciting for us. Now, I want to raise the signal for people here, Pine. So we're going to assume now that people have read that speech because we've been drilling it. We want to build on top of that. I want to ask you some really specific questions about the Bretton Woods II idea, Mar-a-Lago agreement. We'll get there, I promise. The first thing I want to ask you is that in this dual public good, where we have structural trade deficits, Myron said that the 50-year perennial trade deficit has become a national emergency per the president. I don't know if it's an actual thing that he signed or declared or that they've just stated it as a policy. Nevertheless, structural trade deficits for 50 years means structural capital account surplus, right? This stock of treasuries that's held abroad. Now, I understand why that is a risk in that you have foreigners that own your debt. So, but break it down. Yes, that we're importing a lot of goods and exporting capital so that they own a bunch of treasuries. They're lending to us. Isn't that a win-win? What is the risk and what have they described? And can you break that down a little bit more, the economics on why the capital account surplus specifically is a risk, or is it a risk? And if they shrink the trade deficit, which it means they'll shrink the capital account surplus, is that a bad thing? And how do they operate it? And I am going to ask you later about some of these bilateral arrangements that might be happening, but we will get there. Let's talk about this part first.
So he's talking about the capital account surplus and the trade deficit. So a trade deficit is a current account deficit, and then the capital account surplus. So these two things are definitionally opposing each other. If you have a current account deficit, you're going to have a capital account surplus. If you have a current account surplus, you're going to have a capital account. If you have a current account deficit, you're going to have a capital account surplus.
Yes. Their argument, which I think you well summarized, right, is that, dollar Dutch disease, right, the classic Griffin's dilemma, this idea that the U.S. has to run persistent structural deficits and essentially create financial assets that the rest of the world can recycle those dollar surpluses into. Kind of creates this global recycling system where essentially the surplus nations, which are principally based in Asia, manufacturing powers or commodities nations, that either sell raw components or raw commodities or finished goods to the West, right? That has large consumer markets. This system sort of works. It worked for a while. It worked well before China even got into the game, in accelerated fashion. And so this concept of kind of this dollar recycling into our financial assets sort of well embedded into the political economy, the geopolitical economy. I think what became more of a salient political issue is the sense that domestically in the MAGA coalition, this has led to kind of a distribution of winners and losers in the U.S. economy, right? The FIRE sector, the financial service real estate sector, has greatly benefited from that system because they exist to create the financial assets, the scarce, desirable equities, real estate, et cetera, that attract and then absorb foreign dollar surpluses. And so certain segments of the American political economy win, while other segments of the American political economy, like the manufacturing sector that's no longer competitive in a global industrial economy with an extra billion or 2 billion workers, gets priced out of those parts of the value chain. And so for many years, this was just accepted as the way things would have to go, right? Like fundamentally, you can't keep up trade barriers forever, and the U.S. Will get much richer, and those benefits can sort of flow down, sort of trickle down eventually. I think the political shift that happened, in 2016, and then is now being made good on by the Trump coalition, is to essentially meet that domestic political constituency's objection to the fact that they feel like they've been left out of the bargain of this global system. That essentially they've been cast aside in order to sort of arbitrate the true competitive advantage of the U.S., which is creating financial assets and engineering products to absorb global dollar surpluses. But that's kind of there's no real China in that story, except for China as a manufacturing power. I think what really kind of added strategic oomph to this argument is the sense that it is China, in particular, a strategic defense or strategic security competitor to the United States, that is leveraging its expansion of its manufacturing base to expand its shipbuilding and military capacity, right? And so, to a certain extent, like industrial capacity isn't just an economic or a domestic political concern; it's a security concern, right? Can you produce the tanks and missiles and ships that are necessary to sustain deterrence and security to a region that you claim as under your umbrella? And so if it looks like your main security competitor is producing 300 times more it has 300 times the shipbuilding capacity than you, is cranking out missiles and drones with automated manufacturing techniques much more efficient, much more effectively than you can. Well, that's less of a concern about, okay, the flyover country getting hosed. It's more of a question of, like fundamentally our defense industrial capacity is not working. And so the argument from
he mentions the flyover country getting hosed there, and it's like the flyover country getting hosed thing was like a dashboard alert popping up, like the check engine light popping up to say, "Hey, crisis coming." But then all the financialized elites on the coasts have their latent sentiments toward the so-called flyover country people, and so they're like, "Oh, ha ha ha, yeah, you're getting hosed, but you deserve it." And meanwhile, we now have a financialization economy as a military rival to a massive manufacturing and industrial economy. And you can't, like, this is not going to end well for the for the heartland, not just the heartland, the homeland. And you can see that you don't have to be like the initial problem was you had like the heartland people who hated the coastal people because of the ethnic grievances there. But now, even the people within the coastal people are recognizing, this process has been underway for a while now, and we're going to lose our ability to exist in this financialization world for the fundamental material structural reasons of we can't even defend our own territory any longer.
Iran is that having a reserve demand above the normal market demand by private sector actors for reserve assets. They want to store their wealth in something and want something to be that's a safe and liquid asset, or they want to engage in financial transactions in a global market, and you need to have a form of like high quality liquid collateral to post for those financial transactions and to facilitate credit in the offshore dollar system. Treasury securities have a place in the global system regardless, but that sort of excess reserve demand for treasury securities sort of artificially inflates the price of the dollar, the value of the dollar, and that makes the dollar just less competitive onshore for its exports.
So because there's so much demand for dollars, for the dollar to maintain its reserve status, it makes the dollar artificially worth more than it would be otherwise. So domestic suppliers and manufacturers can't compete overseas because anything produced in the United States is going to be sold in dollars. So if it's worth this many dollars because of all the inputs that went into it, the margins and stuff, it has to demand in dollars. If the dollar is stronger, that makes it much harder for non-dollar users to access that component of the market because on a relative basis, it costs even more for them. So having the dollar as the global reserve currency is not all sunshine and lollipops and rainbows for the U.S., not just the U.S. consumer, but for the U.S. producer specifically.
The other kind of component of this that gets less marked upon, it's not really marked upon at all by Steve Moran, but it's actually quite significant, is just how the flows of those dollars into different channels has actually had this effect that it's not just the excess demand for treasury securities, making U.S. onshore manufacturing less globally competitive. I think it's actually more the capital wars and the financial influence that is actually motivating this, as opposed to the pure trade manufacturing competitiveness. So, like official Chinese reserves are roughly $3 trillion. They're unofficial Chinese reserves that are through kind of their offshore entities, state associated banks, entities associated with SAFE. That's another $3 trillion, and maybe there's another trillion or two in really really dark money floating around. So that's really $6 to $8 trillion of essentially reserves that are held by China in the global system, either onshore or offshore. And they've been using those dollar flows to fund their BRI and other geoeconomic and geostrategic projects.
So China, one of China's largest asset bases is this $6 to $8 trillion in treasuries that they have used to finance the whole Belt and Road Initiative thing that they're doing. So this is part of the problem with the idea of, China can just start dumping treasuries and it hurts America because dump treasuries, treasury price goes down, yield go up, credit more expensive for America, yada, yada, yada. That's an own goal for China because they've pegged their currency using all of this, the treasuries that they've used to finance all of these other development projects of theirs. So if they start dumping that asset that they've very carefully constructed this currency peg with, then they're just undermining everything that they're doing. So this is why the U.S. and China, if someone tries to tell you that like China just has one over on the U.S. and the U.S. can't do anything about it. Like there's on both sides of the ledger here, you have the phenomenon of, you know, if you owe the bank $1,000, that's your problem. If you owe the bank $1 trillion, that's the bank's problem. This is the case with both the U.S. and China. They both have each other by the balls. But the U.S., even though like there's a mutually assured destruction thing there, but the U.S. would be destroyed less quickly than China would be because of the nature of the flows of everything. So this is why the United States does have the luxury of being able to move first here, and the one who moves first ultimately gets to determine the terms of the negotiation.
Where often the demand is for dollars, and so essentially they end up selling the RMB that it's held in domestically, and they sort of buy dollars to fund those BRI investments. And so there's a sort of mechanical link between just the scale of the flows as a result of China, you know, running these structural surpluses, channeling those flows not just into our treasury markets, which they really kind of stopped doing, right? Maybe 10 years ago, really. I mean, they're like they try to keep their reserves roughly stable, but it's their ability to kind of direct those flows to support their geostrategic and geoeconomic objectives, to expand their sphere of influence, provide alternative sources of dollar liquidity. That's really a challenge to the U.S., right? So we just don't want China to have those surplus dollars to wield around the world, right? We want to cut off access to this weaponization of the global dollar system. So I think that's what's really motivating it, but that's kind of a complicated thing to explain. Of like China's kind of shell game of sort of passing these surpluses around through different balance sheets in their system and ultimately deploying them around the world for strategic influence and Belt and Road initiatives. And then they become collateralized in ways that then also create lots of fragilities in the Eurodollar system, because a lot of Japanese money center banks, a lot of Middle Eastern banks are in on that. It's just there's this global dollar system essentially that's been sort of infiltrated by Chinese capital at scale. And I think, as you talked about in previous episodes, the U.S. is sort of committed to maintaining the stability of that global dollar system. And so we're effectively backstopping that whole network, which has been sort of infiltrated by Chinese capital.
So
yeah, that's a really good summation of it. You have this global network that is which is, when people talk about the dollar or the weakness or the strength of the dollar, it can mean a number of things. It can mean the DXY itself. I can't remember if he was the one who was talking about this, but I mentioned this on a show recently, that there's like the DXY itself, which would be the dollar compared to a basket of currencies. So you're talking about the currency itself. And there's also the treasury market, which is kind of part of the dollar. And then there's the entire dollar system and everything that it entails. So this is like one of the greatest assets for the United States, that they are committed to. The premise of their global power is this is the dollar system. So they're committed to maintaining and upholding the stability of it. But now China has infiltrated it and intertwined themselves into it, to where their future also depends on it being this stable thing. It's like a parasite may not necessarily want the host to die, because the parasite doesn't exist apart from the host. If the host dies, the parasite dies. So both of them are now intertwined with one another. Next thing he was talking about challenges in global defense manufacturing. But the next chapter that I wanted to go to, I'd encourage you guys to go listen to this whole thing. It'll be in the King Pill Discord, it'll be the King Pill Substack. Go listen to the whole interview. They talk about transition from LIBOR to SOFR, understanding the global benchmark, understanding government dollar policies. And I want to go to this chapter here: international negotiations, gold, Bitcoin, and stable coins, and currency talks. So he described
the negotiating table.
He described the idea of having a defense zone, a security zone, and a dollar zone, a dollar commercial zone, and that they're essentially going to be combining the two of these. That the U.S. security umbrella will extend where the U.S. dollar umbrella does, and that's going to be on terms of we're going to provide this public good of the security umbrella and the utility of the dollar system, but we're going to do it at a price. You're going to have to explicitly opt into it, and we're going to have to negotiate the terms upon which you opt into it. And if you don't opt into it, then you don't get the security umbrella and you don't get the access to the dollar system. And now there's ways that this would not have been feasible in the past, but going forward, I suspect that the integration of things like stablecoins and the potential introduction of Bitcoin as a neutral reserve asset is going to actually facilitate this in different ways. And it seems like the administration is actually probably ahead of the public on this.
To talk about the, the dollar won pair, but we're going to have these conversations elsewhere. Do you actually believe, first of all, that gold or Bitcoin are involved in, what the Treasury Department is negotiating with these countries bilaterally? And if you don't, do you believe stablecoins are already part of that conversation today, if it was had today? And then what are those conversations looking like? What are they saying? You have to peg to us and you have to agree to keep the peg unless we let you cheapen in some sort of bilateral thing. I really want to know because it's not a Mar-a-Lago agreement yet. It's,
No.
yeah.
No, and there's a lot, and I think it's a matter of sequencing and phases. And so we're very in the early phases. I think the early phases, and again, it was a bit of so Besant's plan originally was forward guidance for tariffs that would be geopolitically tiered. There'd be red, yellow, green. For different countries, they would be set at initial different tariff levels, and those would be sort of incrementally adjusted upwards on a monthly basis as a means of inducing coercion, pressure to come to a deal. And it would be ultimately about like forcing the folks in sort of the yellow to decide to become green, right? And then make concessions on all these other different dimensions of, say, economic policy, currency policy, et cetera. But those would be case-by-case negotiations. The upshot would be to sort of reinforce and, re-demarcate the line of the kind of this American security monetary zone. So that was Besant's plan, kind of forward guidance with an explicit kind of let's demarcate friends and allies and partners. And I think in their vision, the phase 2 of that plan was, okay, once you have a clear sense of who's on your side and who's not, who's going to kind of keep trying to play both sides, and who you can really force to kind of get off the fence. Then it's a series of these different arrangements, right? Where the folks inside the club, right, they stay on the Treasury dollar standard, right? Stablecoins can help, more in the periphery, but the core, G7 countries, the core stablecoins are not as relevant at the sovereign level, right? There, it's fundamentally like a sovereign to sovereign series of swaps where you get to help the U.S. extend out its duration. And that's basically kind of what Zoltan Pozar has written about, essentially the Bretton Woods sort of 2.0 or Bretton Woods sort of 3 or Gilded Bretton Woods idea is that you have kind of this hybrid monetary system where the American zone, American centered zone, is kind of the existing system, just like more officially demarcated. And you effectively have a combination of what I would call sovereign financial repression, right? And the flip side of sovereign financial repression is effectively geopolitical QE, right? Because the way this sort of would work is you force the Japanese, the South Koreans, the Taiwanese to effectively buy a 50 or a century or 100-year bond at a fixed, interest rate, say 3.5%, that's below market, and make it non-marketable, so they can't sell it. It can only be repoed at the Fed for dollar liquidity when necessary. But effectively, that's financially repressing that country, right? They're sort of taking a non-market rate below, the market interest rate. And what that effectively does for the U.S. is essentially it's like bank shot or like reach around QE because it's using this foreign central bank balance sheet to effectively buy long duration treasury securities instead of the Fed, right? Like mechanically, that's the same thing as the Fed buying treasury securities, right? In this case, it's the Bank of Japan, maybe helpfully financed with, say, swap lines, right? So you can imagine a scenario where the Fed agrees to essentially dollar finance the purchase by the Bank of Japan of 30 or 50 or 100-year bonds. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like the Bank of Japan buying out on the curve when really it's sort of just backdoor QE. So that's like the center of the system, trying to like get its debt house in order, and then like further anchor and lock in, its allies into its system to help, stabilize the U.S.'s bond market.
So this is so fascinating to me because all the people out there who are saying that the dollar is going to die, they could not be more wrong. It's not just that the dollar's not going to die. It's that the dollar is going to be embedded into the global economy even more than it already is. And this is the video that Jason and I played, and I can't remember if it was my show or his. We played the Cyprian or Vin Armani thing where he talked about like what's coming. He essentially described something very similar to this, and this is actually the expansion of the American empire, because effectively these different nations, what they're signing up for is they're being given a choice. Do you want to continue participating in the dollar system as it is today? Yes or no? Your economies are hopelessly wrapped up in the dollar system as it was proliferated internationally. We have now taken control of it back domestically. The pricing of dollars is now being with the full introduction of SOFR. It's now a secured overnight financing rate, and it's secured, so it's a collateralized rate. And you guys can participate in that. We're going to be siphoning the dollar liquidity out of the offshore system, and we're going to be redirecting it. Now, we've got a debt problem we need to solve. So you and I Me as America, you as the nation negotiating with America, we both have an incentive for this U.S. dollar system to continue to persist. Because if it doesn't, we're all going to be in a world of economic hurt. So you want it to continue to exist. I want it to continue to exist. I'm the one who controls it. So I'm going to dictate the terms here. It's now going to come at a premium. You're not going to be able to freeload on the system. You actually have to be fully bought into the system. And what that's going to look like is you are going to buy into this long-term debt that we issue, which, as he points out, this is just kind of a bit of a workaround from the Fed doing QE to the international banks doing it. So the international banks are going to hold American debt. And this is part of us, like, I'm going to hold X amount of debt as we've agreed upon on my balance sheet, X amount of your debt. And in return, so this is going to help us term out our current debt problem. And in return for that, like, you're not going to be able to trade these bonds. You're buying this long duration paper and you're going to hold it. But what it's going to entitle you to is preferred access to swap lines to be able to access dollars when you need it. So instead of the offshore dollar being out of the control of the Treasury and the Fed, it's going to come under the control of the American domestic apparatuses, where they can control who gets dollars and when and how much. So it very much looks like these, if you look at it right, those foreign nations are actually becoming the line that blurs an American state and this. They're becoming basically like satraps, more explicitly. So they're going to absorb some of this new long duration debt, which is going to secure them access to any of the technological infrastructure the United States builds out. It's going to secure them access to dollars going forward, and it's going to secure them access to U.S. military protection. And then, as Phil said in here, where did he say this? He said something about stable coins in here, but I can't remember how far back it was. Oh yeah, stable coins will replace the euro dollar and be controlled by the US, right? And he says, Matt, not to mention that long-term debt will pay a coupon twice a year that may be paid out in a percentage of gold, right? It may be paid out, and I would imagine that's probably going to be an application of gold. But this whole system, this evolution on the US dollar system is really more kind of like, just as is, it's kind of like a Bretton Woods 3.0 sort of, because it's not really, or maybe it is a Bretton Woods, I guess it would be a Bretton Woods 2.0, but as opposed to a different thing altogether. There's like Mar-a-Lago Accords, which is a completely different structure. And then there's a Bretton Woods 2.0, which is sort of a continuation on the existing system. It's just put different constraints upon it. But I think the possibility for more explicitly integrating gold and or Bitcoin into this is what's genuinely going to make it more like a Mar-a-Lago Accords, where it's a completely different system altogether.
Gold really plays a much more significant role than in the intermediation between East and West, right? Between that system and the rest of the world, specifically China, but other countries as well, commodity nations, that now realize that basically being a participant in the Treasury dollar standard is effectively signing up for this kind of financial oppression. And if they have the geopolitical heft to resist being forced, right, they're going to want to now like increasingly look to outside money, right? Money that can't be, subject to that same form of financial repression. So I think there's folks in the Middle East and obviously China that have been accumulating gold. So you can imagine a scenario, this is sort of Zoltan's idea, that Besson, I think, had some affinity for, is that phase 2 of this kind of geopolitical tariff, recentering the trade and security arrangement, is that you get to a point where you kind of agree to allow gold to kind of remonetize, especially to intermediate between East and West, instead of the Treasury security market. And as long as everyone kind of has a decent amount of gold, right, then you can sort of allow gold to sort of, take its place as a monetary metal more. And it kind of works in everyone's interest to a certain extent, because every sovereign is massively indebted, and essentially allowing your fiat currencies, your paper money, to devalue against a hard asset effectively relieves those countries of the real value of their currencies and the debt that they have. So that kind of wins for China, right? So if China allows the yuan to devalue to 26,000, 30,000 yuan per ounce of gold, that's like a $4,000 ounce of $4,000 an ounce of gold in dollars. that's kind of everyone kind of could see that relieving a bit of the debt burdens, right? It's kind of a soft default, and then allowing gold to kind of take a larger role. Again, it's about managing that, right? Obviously, if gold just like rips to 10,000, that could be highly disorderly. It means something is likely collapsing in the financial system. So they don't want to break the system. No one has any interest in that. As I mentioned earlier, Chinese, money is like heavily interpenetrating the Eurodollar market that's backstopped by the Fed. So we all have like a series of guns to each other's heads. Essentially, it's mutually assured economic destruction. So it's kind of this game of chicken. Who's can sort of be willing to maybe risk a little bit more in order to scare the other side into backing down. And sort of my basic thesis, assuming that was the plan, so I wrote this whole white paper for Besant, was like, okay, I think this is something like your plan. Here's how Bitcoin can sort of be an asymmetric advantage for the United States in that type of scenario, which is if you're going to allow harder assets to kind of monetize, in particular gold, well, that's fine. That could work in this sort of scenario. But that's going to relatively advantage the Eurasian powers that are our rivals, that have accumulated gold on a structural basis. Whereas if you actually just do the math, we roughly own about 35 to 40% of the available Bitcoin supply. If you add up, like ETFs, U.S. government holdings, private holdings, if you do the same analysis for gold, we have about 8 to 10% of the above ground gold stock. Again, rough back of the envelope estimates, but I think that's roughly like a 4-to-1 ratio between the amount of Bitcoin we hold to gold as a percentage of the global supply. So if you allow, like holding all else equal, if you allow those two hard assets to kind of take a more important role in the global monetary system as neutral reserve assets, well, we stand to gain at least 4-to-1 if they move at the same relative ratio. However, we know Bitcoin tends to move much faster than gold. So you could actually imagine practice, if you allow these two hard assets to monetize, Bitcoin will move 10, maybe 20, 30, or 40 times more on a relative basis, giving us like an asymmetric leverage in that kind of transition to a more kind of neutral reserve asset standard, intermediating between different geoeconomic monetary zones, right? That decide they don't want to have this weaponized interdependency and this mutual exposure when it comes to financial and capital markets, right? Even as they know that they can't fully disentangle each other's supply chains. And then buy everyone time to try to negotiate some sort of settlement on these major Eurasian conflicts, right? I think the other major context for all these trade and economic and monetary questions is ultimately security questions. Like the Eurasian periphery is basically the free fire zone between liberal Oceania, right? That's being challenged by kind of rising authoritarian like the Eurasian sort of land powers. So you have competition in the Arctic, you have, subsea cables being cut, you have war in Eastern Europe, you have flashpoints in the Middle East, you have conflict in, India, China, and then you have obviously South China Sea, and then you have North Korea. So this kind of whole ring, right, is this very volatile zone that can, at any one point, could erupt into World War III, right, and the whole system gets destroyed. So I think, part of, some of the plan is like you set the tables for like a grand bargain. Ultimately, it's and these grand bargains throughout history are very ugly in the sense that they're not moral. They're like realist. They're just making hard decisions about, okay, are we going to do a deal with Russia, settle Ukraine? Are we basically going to, do a deal between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Israel to screw Gaza, et cetera, right? Are we going to sell out Taiwan ultimately, right? Like these are the real questions when the monetary system is ultimately downstream of the geopolitical order. And if you avoid war, right, like wars typically tend to be the things that resets everything, and the winners get to dictate the new system. We saw that in World War II. So measures short of war are about, okay, how do we essentially squash the beef, but up the pressure to secure the terms for a new arrangement. So I think I sort of look at the next 3 to 4 years and see that sort of is what's on the table. And I'm looking ahead even to the next 3 to 4 months, and I see a number of these meetings taking place. That sort of is initial, meetings between the U.S. is like trying to lock down its zone. Japan, South Korea, the UK, India, Vietnam, try to like, okay, the core allies and manufacturing centers, like who can we kind of get on our club, make sure our friends are really our friends and are in our corner, and then go to the Middle East. There's meetings that they're scheduling in Riyadh in mid-May, and pull in OPEC plus, right, and try to see if we can peel off maybe Russia from China's orbit a bit here. Maybe we can do some hard commodities and industrial investment deals, even set up a peace agreement in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. If that goes well, then you can maybe bring a subset of those core nations to Mar-a-Lago at the end of June, say, and have like a Mar-a-Lago summit that may be about both security issues, technology, investment, as well as currency arrangements that China's not a part of, right? And this is about, okay, again, it's like the Besant plan of like get your allies in your corner, lock them down, force some subset of like the yellow zone countries to become green through a variety of different trade deals, commodity investment, natural resources, all the sort of under the table things, and then try to isolate China ultimately. Like that's their whole plan, is to try to like contain China, put China in a difficult position, and then force them to the table ultimately by the end of the year. That's like their ideal scenario, right? A lot of things have to go right for that to work, but I think that's kind of the sequence that they're trying to lay out. Of course, the interesting thing is how does China react to that, right? What do they do to, President Xi flew to Vietnam, right, to kind of very explicitly stop that, right? To sort of, pull Vietnam back into their corner. There's been, there were early headlines about China approaching South Korea and Japan and talking about how they would jointly resist tariffs. So I think fundamentally the big question is, are we in a bipolar system or are we in a multipolar system? And how much ultimate power does the US have to wield over a sufficient block of countries to financially repress them into holding our debts, to lock them into this monetary and economic zone, and basically try to create enough of a coalition of trade and industrial powers that can credibly contain China? I think it's a coin flip in my mind, but that's what they're going to try to do.
Very good breakdown. And of course, he doesn't. I think he doesn't put enough emphasis on what's happening in Europe. But that's also because there's certain things that we are just ahead of everyone else on. That ultimately the people who want to maintain the status quo with respect to the U.S. and China the most are the globalists. It is the European oligarch class. Like, they're the people who want to maintain the status quo because the status quo is the thing that they built for themselves to try to enrich themselves. And the United States moving in the direction that they're moving here, like describing this sort of protected zone where we're going to have the dollar zone is going to also be the American security envelope or security umbrella zone, means ultimately those European nations are going to have to decide, do we think that we can actually go toe to toe with the United States and stand them down and build up some sort of alternative structure to compete with that American economic zone or whatever it is? Or do we acknowledge our the fact that by circumstances of time and geography and finance and whatever else, that we're also going to be hoisted on our own petards to an extent. We built this Eurodollar system. It's now the thing that is going to become the pretext for subjugating ourselves more explicitly, where we don't even get we don't like pretend that we're economic peers, or like we can just go into negotiations as peers in any sort of way, but we're going to have terms dictated to us. And I think there's going to be some so-called European nations who are happy for that. They'll acquiesce to that much quicker than the other ones will. But the ones, it does not seem like this administration is interested in playing games with this, and like they're just talking a big game, but then they'll acquiesce. They're playing for keeps. Last thing I got for you guys here today is a hold on just a second here. Interesting statement made from Michael Kratsios. He's the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director. He has this very interesting quote from this speech, and then I've actually got the whole text of the speech, and I'm going to highlight a few interesting points in it. May wind up reading a decent amount of it, but I haven't talked about this in a little while, but I had an interesting conversation tonight. I'll call your memory back to a few months ago when I said that 2025 was going to be the year that the standard model of physics just gets BTFO'd, and there are going to be technologies forthcoming. This is kind of the context for the whole conversation we've been having for the last hour here or so. That part of the creation of this security zone, economic zone, this U.S. dollar hegemony zone, is also going to be access to certain types of technology and the benefits that those technologies accrue to those who have access to them. And there are technologies coming down the line that are mind-breaking, absolutely mind-breaking. And it seems as if Mr. Kratsios here might be hinting at some interesting things.
Our passenger planes are slower than they used to be. Our trains crawl compared to those in other parts of the world. Our cars do not fly. Advances have not stopped, but something has gone wrong. Stagnation was a choice. We have weighed down our builders and innovators. The well-intentioned regulatory regime of the 1970s became an ever-tightening ratchet, first hampering America's ability to become a net energy exporter and then making it harder and harder to build. We seem to have lost focus and vision. to have lowered our sights and let systems and structures and bureaucracies muddle us along. But we are capable of so much more. Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow and improve productivity.
What a fascinating choice of words. Let me see the exact quote on that again. He said, oops. Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow, and improve productivity. Now, there was people in the replies, I think, who were saying, he's basically talking about Microsoft Teams, right? There's some people who are saying, oh, he's just talking, yeah, here you go. Jets, semiconductors, broadband, satellite, smartphones in the cloud, not teleportation and time travel. So I decided I would go see what the actual the context of all that was. So here's the speech that he gave. This was a speech, remarks by Director Kratsios at the Endless Frontiers Retreat, the golden age of American innovation, as prepared for delivery at the Endless Frontiers Retreat in Austin, Texas on April 14, 2025. Thank you for the kind introduction. It is a pleasure to speak to you all this evening here in the early light of the new golden age of America. President Trump has given all of us who serve in his administration a monumental task, the renewal of our nation. I know, and I think you know too, that such a renewal will require the reinvigoration of American science and industry. Over the last few decades, America has become complacent, forgetting old dreams of building a wondrous future. But we know the American pioneer spirit still seeks the exploration of endless frontiers. Our technologies and what we do with them will be the tools with which we will make the destiny of our country manifest in this century. Yet this American hope and the possibility of progress and the power of science and technology does not allow builders and innovators to retreat from politics. Indeed, quite the opposite, which is what brings me here today. A golden age is only possible if we choose it. There is nothing predestined about technological progress and scientific discovery. They require the efforts and energies of men and women, the collective choice for order and truth over disorder and opinion. The last century was called the American century, as despite wars and domestic conflict, the United States stood at the forefront of science and technology, building the future. With the strength of our industry and ingenuity, we created the largest middle class the world has ever seen. As President Trump said to me in his letter laying out the science and technology agenda of this administration, quote, "The triumphs of the last century did not happen by chance. Ours was the atomic age, ours the victory in the space race, and ours the invention of the internet, collecting and connecting the multiplicity of human knowledge. Today, we fight to restore that inheritance. As the failure of the Biden administration's small yard, high fence approach makes clear, it is not enough to seek to protect America's technological lead. We also have a duty to promote American technological leadership. A gap lies between our moment and the speed of transformation America experienced mid-century. Progress has slowed. Yes, large language models astonish us, rockets still turn our eyes upward, and satellites envelop the globe. But as we look forward to America's 250th birthday celebration next year, our progress today pales in comparison to the huge leaps of the 20th century. Consider the country of 50 years ago. As the nation approached its bicentennial, Americans looked forward to electricity too cheap to meter. By the end of 1972, 30 nuclear plants were operational, 55 were under construction, and more than 80 were planned or ordered. That same year, the Apollo 17 astronauts became the 11th and 12th men to walk on the moon. 5 years before, the X-15 rocket plane had set a speed record for a crewed aircraft of Mach 6.7. America was flying higher, faster, and farther than ever before. Today, however, energy prices still burden producers and consumers alike, and the grid remains precarious. Over the past 30 years, only 3 commercial nuclear reactors have been built and 10 have been closed. Despite spending almost twice as much on healthcare as peer nations, we have the lowest life expectancy. Apollo 17 steps on the lunar surface have proved mankind's last. The X-15's record still stands, and the Concorde was decommissioned more than 2 decades ago. Our passenger planes are slower than they used to be. Our trains crawl compared to those in other parts of the world. Our cars do not fly. Advances have not stopped, but something has gone wrong. Stagnation was a choice. We have weighed down our builders and innovators. The well-intentioned regulatory regime of the 1970s became an ever-tightening ratchet, first hampering America's ability to become a net energy exporter and then making it harder and harder to build. We seem to have lost focus and vision, to have lowered our sights and let systems and structures and bureaucracies muddle us along. But we are capable of so much more. Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow, and improve productivity. As Vice President Vance said in a recent speech, the tradition of American innovation has been one of increasing the capacities of America's workers, of extending human ability so that more people can do more and more meaningful work. But unrestricted immigration and reliance on cheap labor, both domestically and offshore, has been a substitute for improving productivity with technology. We can build in new ways that let us do more with less, or we can borrow from the future. We have chosen to borrow from the future again and again. Our choice as a civilization is technology or debt, and we have chosen debt. Today, we choose a better way. Our first assignment is to secure America's preeminence in critical and emerging technologies. This administration will ensure that our nation remains the leader in the industries of the future with a strategy of both promotion and protection, protecting our greatest assets and promoting our greatest innovators. To the degree it even tried to accomplish this, the Biden administration failed on its own terms, led by a spirit of fear rather than promise. The old regime sought to protect its managerial power from the disruptions of technology, while promoting social division and redistribution in the name of equity. They secured American technology poorly and failed to strengthen our leadership at all. Promoting America's technological leadership requires three things of government. First, we have to make the smart choices of creatively allocating our public research and development dollars. Second, we have to make the right choices in constructing a common sense pro-innovation regulatory regime. And third, we have to make the easy choice to adopt the incredible products and tools made by American builders and to enable their export abroad. In a moment of strategic significance, we must be more creative in our use of public research and development money and shape a funding environment that makes clear what our national priorities are. Whether in AI, quantum, biotech, or next-generation semiconductors, in partnership with the private sector and academia, it is the duty of government to enable scientists to create new theories and empower engineers to put them into practice. Prizes, advanced market commitments, and other novel funding mechanisms, like fast and flexible grants, can multiply the impact of government-funded research. At a time defined by the desire to build in America again, we have to throw off the burden of bad regulations that weigh down our innovators and use federal resources to test, to deploy, and to mature emerging technologies. We know, for example, the greatest obstacle to limitless energy in this country has been a regulatory regime opposed to innovation and development. This, too, has been the chief barrier to pushing the envelope again in transportation, whether supersonic aircraft or high-speed rail and flying cars. The time has come to review the rules on the books and to ask whom they really protect and what they really cost. For a future stamped with the American character, the federal government must become an early adopter and avid promoter of American technology. Our innovators make incredible breakthroughs, but consumers, government included, require products that meet their needs, not just the wide-open country of frontier technology. Our industrial might, unleashed at home, and our technical advancements from AI to aerospace, successfully commercialized, can also be powerful instruments of diplomacy abroad and key components of our international alliances. American progress in critical technologies will make us the global partner of choice and the standard setter to follow if we enable and encourage American companies to distribute the American tech stack around the world. This approach to promoting America's technological leadership goes hand in hand with a threefold strategy for protecting that position from foreign rivals. First, we must safeguard U.S. intellectual property and take seriously American research security. Second, we must prevent rival nations from infiltrating our infrastructure and supply chains, as well as from embedding themselves in the infrastructure of our allies. And third, we must enforce export controls and other measures that keep American frontier technologies out of competitors' hands. We face many dangers as a nation, but thanks to decades of feckless American leaders, China in particular has grown into both a geopolitical rival and technological competitor. This threat requires us to protect our science and technology resources with heightened vigilance and defend the vital work American researchers do in public and corporate contexts alike from misuse, theft, and disruption. To safeguard our intellectual capital, we must restrict foreign access to sensitive data and strengthen oversight of international collaborators. Our infrastructure, supply chains, and those of our allies must be secured too. We cannot afford to remain dependent, as we are in too many essential industries, on Chinese inputs and products, nor can we allow our closest partners to become points of insecurity by relying on Chinese-controlled critical infrastructure, whether in telecom, the grid, or AI. We must establish and secure trusted supply chains, implement public-private partnerships to enhance supply chain resilience, and create investment incentives to reshore more critical manufacturing. Finally, after 30 years of subsidizing Chinese growth, it's time for us to stop helping a rival catch up with us in this race. Strict and simple export controls and know your customer rules, with an unapologetic America First attitude about enforcing them, are central to stopping China from continuing to build itself up at our expense. We want peace between our countries, and that peace depends on keeping America's bleeding edge technology out of our competitors' hands. Remember how he described the dual security umbrella and US dollar reserve zone? And then within that zone, if you want access to the technologies that are being employed within that zone, you're not going to get that without signing up for it, with all that entails. There's what this sounds like in many ways is I don't know, you could think of it as like a government that is there's a lot of socialized aspects to it, but with an emphasis on the national, on the nation as a whole. Looking at these public and private partnerships, assuring the welfare, promoting the industry of the people. So it definitely has a maybe kind of a socialist light effect to it, but it's definitely very nationalist. You might call it, I don't know, like social nationalism or something like that. Anyways, the golden age of American innovation is on our horizon if we choose it. In a changing technological environment, the task ahead of us is to adapt to new realities without destroying the American way of life or disinheriting the American worker. We seek, in the most basic terms, to secure our economy, restore our middle class, and uphold America as the planet's best home for innovators. For many years now, the temptation for the kinds of people represented in this room, builders and discoverers, has been to withdraw from politics. In the face of burdensome regulation and inefficient government and the circus of election cycles, many of you have chosen retreat of various kinds. But there is no substitute for victory. You and your fellow Americans cannot afford to give up on the nation. In a world so shaped by politics as well as technology, we must take action in both of these domains. We need all Americans to continue to rise to the occasion, to make full use of their talents, and to build. All of us must labor to preserve the inheritance of the American century, to share with posterity, and to ensure that the technologies that give shape to our world help the American people secure the blessings of liberty we received from our forebearers. I bear that responsibility in my role as the President's Science and Technology Advisor. You bear it too in exercising whatever powers and responsibilities you have, whether in business, education, or the laboratory, as Americans. It is the choices of individuals that will make the new American Golden Age possible. The choice of individuals to master the sclerosis of the state, and the choice of individuals to craft new technologies and give themselves to scientific discoveries that will bend time and space, make more with less, and drive us further into the endless frontier. That was a banger of a speech. I like hearing this sort of rhetoric out of my government. It's very good to see. All right, guys. Well, that is it. That is all that I have for you guys today. Another great lab in the can. Made it over the 3-hour mark. And I've got a bunch of good tabs here to post on the King Pilled Substack later on. So this is the last, most likely the last lab of the week. I'm flying out to Michigan tomorrow to meet up with Mr. Cooper Brooks. So you guys, if you follow me on Twitter @RealKingPilled, you may see some stuff there. There's the possibility that he and I may decide to set our set our cameras up and record some sort of a something up there, but don't count on it. If it happens, it'll be on Friday. Don't count on it. But I will be back on Tuesday for sure. There will be no episode on Monday as well because that's the day that I fly back. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your Holy Week. Enjoy your Pascha or Easter, as the case may be. And I will be back on Tuesday for another episode. Remember, you can support the show. There's Buy Me a Coffee link and a Cash App link in the description, or you can join the King Pill Discord at kingpill.com and be a part of the greatest group on the internet. All right, guys. I appreciate you. Make sure you hit the like button on your way out. Share the show with some friends. If you're listening on the podcast version of this afterwards, then do me a favor and make sure you subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star rating and review. Help us grow the show, grow the channel, grow the podcast, whatever it is. And there's many more things to come. We've put a lot of time and thought into the various different things we want to bring you guys to entertain you and educate and entertain and whatever else we do here. So also EWBSX, look up EWBSX, the cyberbully, on your app store of choice. Download the app, listen to it 24/7. White Boy Summer bangers only. And I'll see you guys on the next Labe. I give you Hulk.
When they took a shot at my hero and they tried to kill the next President of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America